Hello, you are listening to Jump and Shoot, a gaming podcast. As always, I'm your host, Joey, and today we're doing another episode of our Jump and Shoot Sidequests series, which is a series of live streamed, kind of from the hip, discussion based podcasts, as opposed to our regular or traditional produced episodes. And today I'm joined by Mr. Alarm, whom you may recognize. At least audio wise, because we haven't seen him yet. This is face reveal.
The big face reveal. Hello, everyone.
Yeah, so, and what are we talking about today? What is
Oh,
the
well,
thing?
you know what we're talking about. One of my favorite things to talk about, DQ. Because happy tastes good.
Is that Dairy Queen's
That
slogan?
that is their slogan currently. Yeah, I couldn't remember
Nice.
what it was. I thought it was maybe eat great even late, but apparently that's Wendy's.
Oh,
So,
yeah, that sounds like one.
but
So,
yeah.
yeah, we're talking about Dairy Queen, this series, the extremely prominent and very famous in Japan series, Dairy Queen. It's good. You had an experience with Dairy Queen recently, didn't you?
Oh, I did, yeah. I don't choose to go to Dairy Queen frequently, but my employer gave me a gift card to thank us for our efforts going into the hot Phoenix temperatures in the summer here, and uh, so I decided to use it and went over and picked up a buffalo chicken wrap for myself and a Reese's Pieces Blizzard for my wife. Now, this is where it gets a little weird. So I order the Reese's Pieces Blizzard. Uh, the person on the other end of the speaker says, "You mean Reese's Pieces?" I just kind of pause. I'm like, Reese's Pieces Blizzard." And then they pause again and go, "Reese's Pieces?" They just would not let it go. So I said, "Yeah, that's the one." And I rolled out my car window, start cursing furiously, and pull up to the window to get it from them. And they do the fake out with it. They are like, uh, "What did you order?" I go, "The Reese's Pieces Blizzard." And they say
No,
again, "Yeah, they do the
no, they
Reese's
baited
Pieces."
you.
Yeah, and they hold it out, and then they take it back. And I thought they were just like messing with me, but they had to do the thing where they turn it upside down and show you that it's staying in the container. I'm like, just give me the effing Reese's Pieces, whatever you want to call it. I don't understand why.
Bro,
I
did
did
you get
yell at them, but
gaslit by Dairy Queen? Is that what
I don't
happened?
know. They seemed
Jesus.
very hung up on the Reese's Pieces pronunciation, which, as you and I discussed earlier, is a little bit of uh, a thing that drives me crazy, let's say. But it doesn't make any sense.
Oh
If someone
man.
chooses to say that, that's fine. Just don't, you know, correct me if I say Reese's Pieces.
Well, who
uh,
and like I said to you earlier, like who says PCs? Like I know that was like a
I,
marketing campaign in the '90s, but like it sounds too much like feces, and there's a
that
connotation there.
that's a great point. Not to mention the whole fact that it's supposed to rhyme with Reese is the person's name is Reese.
Hmm.
I don't know. Although my favorite Terminator character is Kyle Reese, so I guess maybe there's a point. Who
There
knows?
you go. Yeah, no, that's so funny to me because like you're such like an articulate and well-spoken dude, and like here the concept of like somebody going so far as to like try to correct your
Oh,
pronunciation. So
I was
funny,
just
dude.
like the first time I'm like, oh, did I mishear that? What was that? I'm like, no, it's the Reese's Pieces, Reese's Pieces. It's like what? And do they do that to everybody? Like, how exhausting must that be if you're just gonna correct every single person who says Reese's Pieces? But
Oh man,
uh,
I'm gonna bring this full circle. It's like Dragon Warrior and Dragon Quest, right?
mm-hmm.
So it's like I remember when the series got rebranded as Dragon Quest in the U.S. I remember getting corrected all the time saying Dragon Warrior because I just like I
Mm-hmm.
was 13 or whatever. I don't know. I'm stupid.
It's fine. Either way, people know what you're talking about. There's not another Dragon Warrior to confuse it with, whereas there's the TSR Dragon Quest, which is the reason they had to change the name in the first place.
There you go.
So it
See,
makes sense to me.
you are much brighter than the GameFAQs populace
Oh,
of
game
yore.
facts, yes. I used to be a part of that community as well, and moved on at a certain point.
Thank God.
Uh,
But you know what? I do think the Dragon Warrior distinction is interesting because there's such like a marked change from like the NES Dragon Quests,
Hmm. Yeah.
being labeled as Dragon Warrior compared to the Japanese versions because like we got like the buffed version of Dragon Quest 1. Thank God. It's just so much more playable, I think
Yeah.
personally, than the
And
Famicom
yeah, it
one.
looks a lot nicer too. They redid the character sprite. It's I love that version of Dragon Quest One. So I just went back and replayed that a few months ago, in fact, and still had a great time with it, even though it's a little a little bland after you've played all the sequels.
Hmm.
But it's nostalgic and uh, going back to the start of what we're discussing. The first time I played Dragon Quest was as Dragon Warrior on the NES when I was, gosh, like I don't know, 6, 7 years old or so, and a friend of mine had it. I looked at the cover, and that's all I needed. It's like a badass soldier fighting off against a dragon. The art's really well done on the American version, despite that not usually being the case back
Yeah.
then. That was usually when they changed it from the Japanese art, they took all the personality out of it. It's no longer anime. And while, yeah, of course, taking Toriyama out of Dragon Quest by default removes a lot of its personality, it's still a really striking piece of art, I think.
Yeah,
And
I say this like while I'm wearing a shirt with the US Mega Man uh, cover art. I didn't even realize this.
mm,
But yeah, I actually really like the Dragon Warrior art. I mean, it looks like a Dragonlance novel, you know?
yeah, it really does.
And
Hmm.
I don't really think the Dragon Quest 1 Famicom art like is really that good. I mean, it's kind of like a chunky dragon. I mean, it's very Toriyama still.
Yeah, yeah. It's a very cutesy piece of art as opposed to the very serious, yeah, like you said, kind of fantasy literature version. And uh, beyond that, just speaking only about the box art right now, like Dragon Warrior 2 also had excellent box art,
Oh
and
yeah.
that's one that I think a lot of people assume is done by an American, but it's actually a Japanese artist who does
Oh,
some really awesome art, and yeah, I love that. That's probably my
interesting.
favorite of the four that made it over to the US back in the 90s, so or 80s and 90s.
And
Yeah.
it's people always talk about like the Western RPG influence on Dragon Quest, which is obviously very omnipresent in the series. So it's
Mhm.
like I think there's kind of like a cool little mingling there of like this super Western serious art in a very distinctly Japanese game that's sort of inspired by some of these Western RPGs. So that's my take on
Yeah.
it. So
Yeah.
Dragon Warrior 1 was your first then? Did you play the sequels back in the day
Y- Yeah, yeah. I
on NES?
actually played them all pretty much chronologically. Trying to think if I skipped anything. Because I played 1, 2, and 3 and 4 all on the NES, and then I believe I played the ROMs of 5 and 6 before playing 7. It might have been just a little bit after 7 that I played 6, but yeah, pretty much the whole series except for 10 in order. So I'm kind of fortunate enough to have that perspective of playing them when they were relatively new, which
Nice.
uh, going back, I think they've all aged really well for the most part. I've replayed pretty much every single entry in the series and enjoy all of them. There's not one that I dislike. So if I say one's my least favorite, I'm still pretty much giving it like an 8 out of 10.
Yeah, that's
It's
how
still
I
one of my
feel too.
favorite games ever.
This is see. I feel like you know what, Steve. Like we just always say the same thing. So I'm just gonna be devil's advocate now to you.
Sure.
So that's just gonna be. I'm gonna be like that kid who raises his hand in philosophy 101 to correct his professor.
It has
So
to be done.
yeah, that's it. That's me. It's this is the other form of Greg, who was a character on our last episode, I
Oh,
believe. The Greg who knew everything.
it's Greg Reese. Is that
Yeah,
who
yeah.
we're speaking with?
Greg Reese, but he pronounces it Reese. Yeah,
Yep.
there you go. It's so good.
Two Gregs. Uh,
Everyone, my favorite genders are the two Gregs personally, so that's how it goes. But Dragon Warrior 1 was my first Dragon Warrior. I'm already doing it. Dragon Quest 1 was my first as well, and I think so. I often I don't know if it's like false Mandela memories or what, but I don't really know what the first game I ever played was. I'm pretty sure it was Castlevania, but it could be
mm.
another NES game or Pac-Man or something. But Dragon Quest One was definitely like within the first like 5 or 10 games I ever played.
Oh wow.
And I didn't like know what to do. I probably got stuck on the stairs. I probably didn't know how to go down the stairs because
So the big question, could you read at the time?
so I kind of like learned context clues
Hmm,
from just kind of like what things are. So I'd be like,
interesting. Okay.
what does this mean to my dad? And he would say like item or whatever, and I'd be like, what is that? And he'd be like, you use the thing that heals you or something, like whatever. A much more simplified version. I was not that intelligent. So like I kind of it was like reading hieroglyphics, I guess. you know
Yeah, just learning through association like that, that's
Mhm.
really a really interesting way to first experience a game like that.
Yeah, that's like actually how I learned how to read English. So, like originally, so it was super helpful. Zelda, thanks, man, for helping me learn how to read.
That's awesome.
uh, and it's like
I'm kind of jealous in a way.
yeah, it's kind of it's an awesome way. I want to if I ever have a kid, which I probably will never because I hate kids. But if I if I ever do, I think it's a good way. I just think video games are a good way to like you said, learn by association. But like it's funny, and this is kind of an aside, but like I was like super. I mean, I am still blind, but like I mean, I'd be like up here to the screen. So it's like my parents are like, what the fuck is wrong with you? Like, are you trying to learn how to read, or are you
That's
like, what are you
amazing.
doing? So I still remember, I think it's like a sensory thing for me learning how to read because remember smelling the static of a
Hmm,
TV screen. It's just like such a strong sensory memory because I was so fucking close to it. So
makes sense. Yeah, so for me it was kind of I was able to read at that point, not all that well or quickly or anything, but the friend of mine who owned the game, he just did not care for it. I think he got it as a present. He said it felt like homework to him to play it, so
oh,
it's like
interesting.
you have to read and do math, and he just wanted none of it. So yeah, he just kind of he allowed me to play it, to borrow it, later on when I had my own NES. But yeah, it was definitely a brand new type of experience for me. A game that wasn't about action, it wasn't about timing or platforming, anything like that. It was like you said, very influenced by Western games that I had no exposure to. I
Mhm.
didn't know what Ultima was or Wizardry, anything like that. So it was, yeah, just a completely just a complete paradigm shift for me at the time.
Totally. See, Greg here. Greg was born with complete knowledge of all RPGs. So I went in this as an expert. No, I didn't. Yeah, no, that is true because I think it's like as a kid that kind of game didn't really grip me. It was just like the visuals of it were kind of enthralling because it was like obviously swords are cool to everyone that age. Like transcendent of culture or gender or whatever. Swords are so cool to everybody at that age.
Yep.
And like having like this concept, like it was like it was like a almost like a cartoon in a way for me to put that game on and kind of like dink around in. But I didn't really like get super into it until I started playing Final Fantasy and other RPGs, and then I kind of retroactively went back to it and started to develop more of an appreciation. But like we had the sequels too, like 2, 3, and 4, and I don't know if I ever really played 4 back then. Uh, but it was like such a cool thing to me because we had all these like it was like a series, right? You had multiple games in a series, and they were all accessible. So it was like this like huge canon to a kid, which
Yeah.
is I feel like people do feel like that now. Like if you're like, because so many people like just didn't grow up with Dragon Quest in the U.S. or like missed the train on it or something because of how weird the marketing was here. So like I do feel like even now like actual adults like are like there's so much here. Where do I go? Where do I start? Like
Yeah.
so that was like a really interesting kind of like intriguing thing. And again, it also facilitates that sort of same feeling that a a big fantasy epic would have in that sense. So it
Mhm.
all kind of comes. But
And
yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
oh, sorry, I do not at all want to make this a comparison of Final Fantasy and Dragon Quest,
Yes.
but it. So the interesting thing about you saying that it wasn't until you played Final Fantasy that you could appreciate Dragon Quest, Dragon Warrior. For me, it was not quite the other way around, but I played Final Fantasy after Dragon Quest, and I just didn't care for it when I first played it.
Hmm.
And that is 100% because I didn't know how to play it. So it wasn't too long after I played um, Dragon Warrior 1, Dragon Quest. I'll just refer to it as Dragon Quest from now on just to avoid confusion. But um, in Dragon Quest, at least in the American version, if you bought an item, since you only had the one party member, it would automatically equip.
Right.
And in Final Fantasy, that wasn't the case. So I rented Final Fantasy, uh, made my party, went to the item shop, bought a weapon for each one of them, gave it to them. I didn't even think anything of selecting the equip option on them. So I'm running around punching enemies, assuming that I had the weapons equipped. And I actually made it all the way to the pirate bosses with that. I would use like
Whoa.
the yeah, I'd use the ruse spell, and that would allow my white mage to stay alive, and I would just punch the shit out of Garland over and over. So, uh,
Wow.
not the most fun way to play Final Fantasy, it turns out. So, um, it wasn't until I think I saw a screenshot in Nintendo Power showing um, the warrior attacking with a sword. I'm like, wait, you can. It shows the sword in the game. Like I must have been doing this wrong. So I rented it again, figured out how to equip items properly, and at that point, yeah, I I would say I prefer Final Fantasy over Dragon Quest One, but it was a very weird thing because I just thought every RPG was like Dragon Quest. Why wouldn't they be? It's uh,
You know,
yeah,
that's funny because that is such a thing that existed back then that doesn't really exist now. I mean, like people will do stuff like that now, obviously, um, especially if you go into games blind. But I mean, like back then, like the idea of there was just so much more distinction, I think, between games and like really idiosyncratic ways like that. You know,
yeah,
it's like,
absolutely.
well, now I'm playing Dragon Quest, so now I'm playing Final Fantasy, so now I have to manually equip that. Like that thing was such a contrast. Like it was hard for your brain to wrap around that. Or like, like playing Fantasy Star and like having to like kind of like program your attacks in a certain way. Like I remember that being really weird and stupid to me.
Yeah, it's funny, and I was very young, and it was just you would often rent games that were you just couldn't figure out what to do in them, or they were just ridiculously difficult. I just chalked it up to that. Speaking of the Ultima, eventually rented Ultima Exodus, which at the time I was just like, why would anyone want to play this? This is a garbage game, not knowing that it's what inspired Dragon Quest. But yeah, that NES port, maybe not the best
The
RPG, but
start.
it's a little bit difficult to get into. But yeah, I had no idea it was a game that influenced Dragon Quest and technically came before the PC version.
The only Ultima that I give a shit about is the one you cast in Final Fantasy Tree, because we don't call it 6. It's Final Fantasy
Uh,
Tree. But no, I never played Ultima. I one day maybe I'll go back. Boomer RPGs scare me, man. I'll be real with you. Like I
I,
can't really do rogue or anything either because it's just my power isn't high enough. I don't know.
I would recommend the Quest of the Avatar for NES. I think that's a pretty decent remake that's actually somewhat approachable as far as Ultima goes. It's playable. They modernize a lot of things. It is a Japanese developed port where
Mhm.
it's significantly upgraded. But yeah, if you ever play an old Ultima, that's the one I'd recommend.
It's going on my list. On my list of games that like I may never play, but like I want to. I want to have
Yeah,
the clout.
yeah.
So,
Potential for game literacy and yeah, I
mhm.
have a big list of those sorts of games myself that I know I'll never get to,
Oh yeah, I mean,
unfortunately.
unfortunately, also these are a lot of games I have not gotten to yet. So
Oh yeah, yep. I have a
yeah,
similar backlog right now.
it is what it is. I try not to use the B word. Try not to think about it. It's just like
It can be depressing, yeah. And
yeah,
we shouldn't look at it that way
yeah.
either, to be fair. Just their games we'll try to play eventually. That's it.
We need a yeah, exactly. We need a PC term for
Yep.
backlogs.
Uh,
Hell yeah. But so I never really kind of got a lot of the frustration with Dragon Quest 2 through 4, or mostly 2, because I think I only played a little bit of 2 growing up. It wasn't until later, like that I started to become like intellectually capable of playing an RPG in like a meaningful way, that I went back and I played through them. I actually did beat the NES version of Dragon Quest II, and that game like sucks. Not really, but like
it's
it's not easy for a kid.
so that's the one that I'm going to say is maybe my least favorite in the series.
Yeah.
But again, it's another one I just replayed recently. I still really enjoy it for the most part. I just think mostly uh, the last half, the second half, and the cave to Roan and all of that is just a
Mm,
nightmare to play through. It's just a little too punishing with the difficulty. Yep, that cave. Oh my god. Uh,
sucks.
but but when I did
Sucks.
play it for the first time, I thought it was amazing, and
Hmm.
a lot of that's because I didn't get far enough in to see where it becomes a little bit more frustrating. But it was another thing it was a similar paradigm shift where it's like, okay, I have multiple people in my party now. I have a bunch of different types of magic spells I can use. I can get on a boat and travel around. There were so many new things in that game for me.
Yeah. I would imagine that shift from like single dude to party was pretty huge for people at the time, even though Final Fantasy 1 I believe had come out before Dragon Quest 2. But
Yeah, I don't
like,
remember the timing in Japan or America for that, but yeah, I
yeah.
definitely
And we got
have.
them late too. We got them like years after like 2 or 3
Mhm.
years after they came out. At least Dragon Quest
Yeah.
1. Okay, so Dragon Quest 2 87, January 26th, 87, and Final Fantasy 1 was, I should know this offhand. I didn't study for the test. Uh Oh, so wow. Okay, so Final Fantasy 1 actually came out in December of 87, so almost exactly a year later.
Okay.
So yeah, so I guess the party system would have been like you would have seen it first in Dragon Quest 2, at least like in that traditional old school JRPG setting. So that's wild. That's really wild to think about. So I think it maybe in a sense that Dragon Quest 2 at the time was probably a lot more enthralling than I think it is now. Even though, because like what had happened, it was like production wise, they didn't expect Dragon Quest 1 to do as well as it did. It wasn't like a Final Fantasy situation where this is the last one, we're putting our whatever into it. But this like they didn't expect it to do so well, so their sequel got greenlit like super fast or like kind of hastily. So a lot of Dragon Quest 2 is sort of cobbled together in haste. I
Hmm.
guess I don't know if that's actually like true, but like I mean you can see it like production wise that is what happened, I guess, and like it can't like the turnaround time was super fast, and it's
Yeah,
like
that's my understanding as well. And it's still in scope. It's so impressive. I mean, they squeeze or they make the entire world of the original Dragon Quest just a small continent in
oh
the
yeah.
world of Dragon Quest 2. So you really see how much larger everything is, and the dungeon design is significantly different.
Mm-hmm.
Um, you no longer have to use torches. That's a big thing for me.
Same.
That's the worst part of revisiting the original Dragon Quest is dealing with torches. At least the NES version. I forget how
Yeah.
they upgraded that in the remakes, but
It's
oof.
you have the glow spell, and it's not as like annoying because I feel like I don't know, maybe the stats got buffed in the remake or something. It's still annoying, but it doesn't fade away as fast. Maybe that's another
Yeah,
thing that
yeah. I
happens
feel
too.
like it fades away so quickly, and you're just it's ridiculous to deal with. But that was by far the worst part of revisiting that game for me, even though I
Yeah.
still enjoyed it for the most part.
Yeah, so funny enough, I actually just kind of on a whim, like after the Dragon Quest 12 announcement, I bought the physical version of the Dragon Quest trilogy for Switch because I guess I didn't own it and I wanted to spend like $45 on like something that was worth like 12, but like I bought it and I'm like fuck it, I'll just run through Dragon Quest 1. It's been like a couple years since I went through it. And then I just started playing 2 and 3. So, and this was like before we had decided this was the topic too. So,
Yeah, yeah.
there you go. I didn't do this just to over prepare. It was
Well, yeah,
coincidence.
and I have that physical copy as well. I know we've discussed a little bit about the remakes, and I feel a little conflicted toward them. I think they sound amazing. I'll start with the best
Mhm.
compliment I can pay them. It's the best that those games have ever sounded, and I really enjoy um, the redone music. I don't, as much as I like the Super Famicom versions, I don't think Sugiyama's music translates that well to the Super Nintendo sound
Mm.
chip. It sounds a
Yeah,
little warbly to me. Um,
I see that.
so I really like the upgraded versions that are on the smartphone and Switch versions. I think those are really good. Um, that being said, I feel like there's something off about the presentation on a visual level. It feels a little bit choppy and it's kind of indiscernible, but I've heard other
Mm.
people echo that as well. I'm definitely not the type to usually notice that sort of thing, like just a subtle choppiness, but it drives me crazy for whatever reason. And it seems to
Yeah.
get better from 1 to 2 to 3, to the point where 3 is fairly smooth and you don't notice it as much. And then, yeah, like the font is a little bit ugly, and
I
there's
like
just
the Switch
something
font though. I
lacking.
I like the
Mm.
I honestly like I think the Switch because it's a little different than the mobile version.
Yeah, the
I
mobile's the worst. It's
Yeah.
just so plain. But that being said, they're very good. It's a very good way to re-experience those 3 games. I would absolutely recommend them, just with a caveat.
Yeah, I think unless you're like a hardcore purist, I think it's not even worth touching the NES version unless like you're just like curious for posterity's sake. But like if
Hmm.
you're like actively trying to play through the series, I think you're probably going to have the best experience with or the Switch or mobile versions of 1 through 3, just because
Yeah, yeah,
they're just so much smoother. I mean, yeah, it kind of cuts the edge off a little bit in terms of like difficulty because they added a lot of quality of life. There's a quick save option, so you don't always have to go to the goddamn king every time that you want
that
to save,
oh,
which
every
sucks.
time. Yep.
Everything's a little faster, but yeah, I feel you on the choppiness. So when I replayed the series, or because like I guess I didn't play a lot of Dragon Quest growing up. Like I think I only really ever finished 1 and 3, and I think that was really it. And I don't even think I finished 8 when it came out because I didn't really like it then. I don't know. I was
Oh,
like
interesting.
a teenager. My opinion doesn't even matter then, you know. So but yeah, so I went through the series like 2 years ago and I played 1 through this may trigger you. I I played 1 through 6 on my phone,
Mm.
this guy right here. And actually really liked the mobile versions, honestly.
You
And
know,
I
I
fucking hate touchscreen. I just need to say that.
yeah,
You need
it,
to understand
it's
this.
it's rough. Yeah, I've played through 1 to 3 uh, on an iPad, and even with the much larger screen, the touch controls are a little bit difficult. But 4 through 6, I think those are really solid ports. It's basically the same as the DS, just looks a bit nicer. They do
Hmm.
have the uglier font again, but
Hmm.
that's not like a deal breaker to me by any means. It's just you just have to deal with it with mobile ports, I guess.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. Hmm.
yeah,
And it's one
they're
of those
very
things that
very good ports.
it bothers me though. Like I think about replaying them because I was like, should I play through 4 through 6? And I was like, nah, nah. I honestly, the font was one of the reasons why. But I mean, if it was my first time through, like it was my first time through those games, um, I didn't mind it that much at all. Like it was like it
Yeah,
wouldn't like really make me like aesthetically. I always long for something more, but it's not like a thing that really affects my enjoyment. But
agreed.
yes,
Yeah.
I really did like those versions. I think they added a lot of quality of life with just being able to save at any time. And I think it was Tim Rogers who said that like his ideal way to play Dragon Quest is to like play it in the bathtub or something like that. So I did
That's
that, and it
very
was
Tim
actually
Rogers.
awesome. This is why I start like I have my phone with me. I like take a bath like at least once a week,
Mm.
and I'll like I was like you know it was I now associate the bath with like relaxing Dragon Quest
Yeah,
experiences.
and that totally makes sense to me. I forget, it might have even been Tim Rogers where I heard this, but yeah, the kind of philosophical approach that Japan has to Dragon Quest is, you have a long work day, you get back, you might only have like an hour to play Dragon Quest, but you want it to be as like relaxing as possible. So yeah, playing it in a bath makes complete sense with that
Mm,
approach. And it's just like, okay, I'm just going to unwind after work with some Dragon Quest and then move on, maybe do your chores and everything and get ready for the next day. But you'll stretch that experience out over months and months because those games can be so long. And if you only play for a short while, then yeah, totally makes sense. So the mobile versions are great for that. And I do really enjoy the DS versions, even though they took party chat out of 4.
yeah.
It's still playable. I do like party chat, even though it's a little bit more limited than I think a lot of fans suggest.
Yeah, it's
But
kind of just there. It doesn't really
mhm,
ever add much. It's just like a nice
yeah,
little flourish.
yeah, there's so many times where I hit the button for party chat and you just get the ellipses. That's it.
Yeah,
They don't have
exactly.
anything to say, or they repeat themselves. But I will uh, if I replay 4, I'll play the iPad mobile version just to get the party chat. But the other ones, I'll definitely play the DS version. Just they look a little bit more consistent to me than the upgraded mobile ports, but you can't go wrong either way, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree. And it's funny you bring up that ellipsis because it's just so like passive aggressive,
Yep.
especially in 5 where it's like you
Oh,
could you could get married, and so it's like you get I was fully expecting like 3 ellipses and then your wife in that game to be like, I just think it's funny that, and then it goes into like 17 paragraphs of the thing that you
yep.
did wrong before you got turned to stone by the gargoyle demon. Like,
Exactly. Like, tell me what you really feel, Bianca. Like,
yeah.
stop.
Real quick, canon wife in Dragon Quest V. Go.
Bianca.
Oh yeah,
I'm
not even,
boring. Yeah.
bro. Yeah, of course. I mean, you get like the boring is part of Dragon Quest.
Yeah. You go with. I think she's the canonical wife, for lack of a better term, that Yuji Horii kind of considers the main female protagonist in the game. I
Mhm.
think Nira is a bit on the boring side. She's just the nice one.
Right.
Deborah, I think, is really interesting just because she's just a jerk to you the entire
Yeah, she
game.
hates
But
you. Yeah.
yeah, and she's a bit more of like a physical fighter. That's kind of a nice change compared to the other two. So it's usually one of those that I choose depending on which version I'm playing. And the yeah, I don't know if we should just speak about Dragon Quest V right
Yeah,
now,
it's
but
fluid, man. We
yeah,
just
yeah.
go
So
with the flow.
the thing with that game that makes me really prefer the DS version or just any of the remakes, the PS2 one as well, is that you can have 4 party members as opposed to 3 in the.
Oh, Steve cut out. This is the wonderful thing about doing a live stream is that sometimes technical issues happen and I can't edit them out, but that's the glorious part of it.
Am I
So,
back?
oh, he's back. You are back.
Yeah,
You
back. Okay,
just your avatar is though. No, I do not see your pretty face.
let me see. All right, think we're
Ah, there
good.
you are. You are back.
All right, yeah, sorry about that. I've never seen Discord just disappear like that.
Well,
uh,
once you go live, that shit happens.
Not a problem. Um, let's see. Going back to what we were talking about with
The
the
party
Super
members.
Famicom version, yeah. So
Hmm.
3 party members, especially considering the main focus of the game is that you're traveling with your family,
Hmm.
which is your wife and your 2 children. But you basically have to leave one of them in the wagon the entire time if you want that to be your your canonical party. So it's a little bit silly to only have 3. I'm not really sure why that decision was made. Um,
Hmm.
but in the remakes,
I didn't know
I
that.
like it a lot more having the extra party member along, and also
When
like the monsters. Uh, some of them are very useful, and but they're just so difficult to obtain, and that's you could just be grinding for hours and hours and hours to get one of them, and might not might not ever get that opportunity.
Yeah. That's why I always go Slime Knight, pretty much. But
Slime Knight's good.
it's funny. This is this is probably a little dark. The leaving the baby behind thing,
Oh
like
no.
it's like when my grandparents had, or maybe my great grandparents, when they had to flee Iraq, they had to like leave behind a baby, and
Oh
it's just
no.
so fucked up. And it's like, why is Dragon Quest V got to make me relive familial trauma? Like,
it's just such an odd idea to just be like, okay,
Powerful.
well, you have the two. I don't know if you saw like the uh what was the name? Your Story, the Dragon Quest CGI movie
Oh
that came
yeah.
out last year.
I know this is a
And
hot take. I love it personally.
I liked it. I thought it was fine. The ending's weird.
It
But
is
you know,
weird.
once you accept it, I think it's actually a really good, succinct version of that story, and it
Hmm.
has excellent CGI, good action. Yeah, I don't have many big complaints about it, but except for that they just took out one of the kids, and there's no real
Oh
reason
yeah,
to.
yeah,
But other than
yeah.
just rushing through the story,
It's funny because that movie I could like write a annoying dissertation about that movie and why I think it's
Mhm.
genius. But I'll
it's
spare you all that because I
I'm
don't
I'm
want to
just happy to
fight.
hear that it has more fans than I initially thought, because man, the reception when that first came out was, especially in Japan, was just so negative,
I
and
could imagine it's because people like expect so much safety from Dragon Quest that I think
mhm.
something like that's kind of super subversive. Uh, yeah, I don't know. I don't want to get into spoilers in it too, so
Yeah, I don't want to say anything
brush
other
that
than
over.
check it out on Netflix. It's free on Netflix if you have that, and very much worth watching.
So yeah,
Yeah,
I'm a poser though because I only played the mobile version of 5. I didn't even play
okay.
the DS one because DS one, and this is another. It's kind of an aside, but I think it's relevant. The DS and now 3DS versions of these Dragon Quest games are fucking expensive. Why are they
Yeah,
so expensive? It's
I
because
don't know.
speculators and the market. I hate it so much, man. This is why y'all need to port that shit to the Switch or to the P. Just port it, bro. Come
And
on.
yeah, and they just skyrocket out of nowhere too. It's like for years you could get Dragon Quest 9 for fairly cheap. I bought a
Yeah.
copy for my nephew years after I played it, and it was like $20.
Now it's
Now, yeah.
80. 80, bro.
Oh man.
Dragon Quest 7. I got it for $30 at Target like 2 years ago. Now it's
Mm.
$100. Not
Yeah,
even
yeah. I just saw
so
8 is like
dumb.
150 at least now for an open copy. So it's, yeah,
Jesus.
just exponentially increasing at this point.
That's
It's
more expensive
crazy.
than the PS2 version, man, which you didn't sell like incredibly well, but like you know what it is? It's Cursed King, this is pun intended. Cursed King like Sugiyama sitting there in his throne of deceit and gluttony and
Uh,
just being like watch as I own you all capitalistically with my shitty music. Like I just want to attribute all
uh,
negative things about Dragon Quest to this old ancient man. No ageism here. Like there's a difference, okay? Like he needs to go. Just dissolve into
yeah,
dust. Complete the
yeah. I mean,
cycle.
needless to say, his political opinions, his social opinions are really disgusting. I've always enjoyed his music, but that being said, I do think 11 it felt very phoned in. There's a lot of
Oh yeah.
reused music from earlier games in the series. It's
80%.
yeah, it's clear that he's just he needs to retire, and I would like to see another take. I don't at all dislike his original music. It's just, yeah, I think at a certain point you need to hang it up, and we're starting to get to that point with some of these older series where it's
Yeah.
like, when do they it, going back to the Your Story movie, which slightly changed the monster designs from Toriyama's, or the character designs. They still maintain their personality. They still look like the monsters they're supposed to be, but it's a slightly different take on them. And I wonder if that was just them testing the waters to see if
Yeah.
maybe for a video game they could do that next.
Ooh. Yeah, what I think, and I've kind of noticed this pretty much since Dragon Quest 7, is that it's like they're trying to step away a little bit from Toriyama's designs because in case he doesn't do another game,
Hmm.
want to, or gets too old or whatever, or just like gets disillusioned, with the series or busy, that they always have like a backup kind of artist or style to use in the event that he's not available for the next installment. So, but
Yeah.
just backpedaling a second into the music, like, so I actually didn't know about Sugiyama's political views until like a year ago. And then I was like, oh, I knew I hated this man for a
They're
reason. But
concerning,
yeah,
to say the
but
least.
yeah, for real. But like, So I respect the classicism. Is that the right word? Yeah, let's go with that. Okay, I respect that of the original Dragon Quest, and even the newer ones, like even 9 or 10 or 11. I respect the sort of iconic style, and I think that it does fit the games for the most part. The problem is that like it's not doing a lot to make this series more appealing. And not that like the series has to like have explosions and like grand choir scores to be appealing, but like it's not it's like there's a difference between like like working with a formula that you know is good and just being stuck in your ways like
Yeah,
conservatively. Um,
exactly. Yeah,
and I think that
and
like Sugiyama's music is like a clear indication of that.
yeah, and you can. It's really odd. Getting outside of Dragon Quest for just a moment, I was watching the movie Dragon Quest Godzilla versus Biollante recently,
Mhm.
and by recently I mean a few years ago. And my wife pointed out, she's like, that music sounds familiar. Does that sound like your Dragon Quest games? And I like listened to it closely. I'm like, it really does. And then when we got to the end, it says music by Koichi Sugiyama. So
Oh
it's
damn!
so even the movies he does still just sound like Dragon Quest music. It's the
Huh.
strangest thing to watch a Godzilla movie with Dragon Quest music.
Bro, I can sit here and I can like give you another dissertation why I think Sugiyama's music kind of sucks because it jocks music theory so hard and uses these same boring scales like over and
Oh,
over again.
it,
And it's like, oh, look at this. We'll put the horns here and that's going to sound spicy. And it's like, so much of the music sounds like putting black pepper on a potato and like considering it flavor.
uh, well, I'll respectfully disagree, but I will point out that he did an awesome job of creating fabricated crescendos in Dragon Quest IV for the NES and the battle theme, like just
Oh,
using
yeah,
that
yeah.
just taking advantage of the limitations of the hardware and the music you could do to kind of create this fake kind of symphonic sound to it is a really interesting sort of thing. But yeah,
That's
in
a really good
general,
point.
he's
That's a really
yeah,
good point.
it's kind of an interesting usage of the sound capabilities, but he hasn't been that innovative in a while. I'll give you
Oh,
that
yeah.
for sure.
No, it's funny how like technical limitations sometimes bring out creativity in artists
Mhm.
like this.
Yeah.
And it's like I mean to a much lesser extent. I think like Uematsu too, like when he
Mhm.
started to just being able to compose and not worry about like coding it or programming it. There's just like something there that almost gets lost. Like there's something
Yeah.
like about the struggle of having to deal with this that like kind of makes it more like raw, And I
Yeah.
think that
I vote.
that works really well for a lot of this stuff and like but what you're saying about like the pseudo symphonic thing with the NES sound chip like that's like master class shit and it breaks my heart that he just never
Yeah. Yeah.
decided to
It's
like do anything different.
mhm. Yeah, agreed. Yeah, and but make sure you buy all his CDs.
Oh yeah. So for those of you who don't know, a big reason why Dragon Quest XI's original releases did only had MIDI versions of the songs was because Sugiyama didn't want to put in the orchestral versions because he thought it would detract from his CD sales.
He owns a big piece of that pie. Let's just say that much.
It's
Uh,
like Sting level. It's like the fuck him. All right.
yeah. That being said, at least we eventually got the orchestral version of 11, which, even though again going back to it's probably my least favorite music in the series, it's a pretty distinct improvement. I think getting the orchestral version as opposed to those MIDI horns that you were referring to
Yeah.
earlier.
It
Um,
sounds like it, fucking like ska, like the worst
oh my
parts
god.
of ska with like the
Mm,
worst parts of like a generic like Hollywood like romanticized. I don't know how to describe it. It just sucks. But that being said,
uh,
I think the Dragon Quest XI battle theme kind of bangs. Like it
mm,
just like it's kind of good. I think it works really well. Um, but then you hear it 5,000 times and it loops after 20
yeah, yeah.
seconds. So
It's agreed.
so piss.
And yeah, going back to the 3DS games that we were talking about and how rare they are, which is very surprising and very upsetting because I think in as far as the remakes go, I think my favorite is 7. I think that's
Yeah,
the one
I
that
think so too.
changed the most.
Hmm.
It's just such a much more accessible version of that game, and I'm a big fan of the original.
Hmm.
You just have to have a ton of patience, and it's not something that you should play through as quickly as possible, or else you'll just be driven mad by the
Yeah,
repetition.
yeah. So like when I played through the series, I did it pretty quickly. Like I think it took me about maybe less than a month. Well, no. With 11, about a month,
Oh
and it was a
wow,
lot. That's a lot of Dragon Quest.
that's a lot.
This is why I hate Sugiyama's music, because if I have to hear
uh,
one more time, I'm gonna like it's just gonna be over.
oh my gosh.
Sorry, I don't mean to bring this up. I had to have one
Oh, that's
more one more diarrhea dump all over. So a friend of mine, she like really loves JRPGs, and she gets into whatever JRPG she plays a lot. But the barrier with Dragon Quest XI was too much for her because of the constant repetition of the music and the looping, and it's like, damn, if that really distracts you could distract somebody so much. Like, I feel like that was a barrier of entry for like the more modern Dragon Quest stuff, especially when you
this.
had
Yes.
stuff like, like Final, because what came out around 8, Final Fantasy X, which is like a super lush score, and I'm not trying to compare DQ to Final Fantasy, just like contemporarily, or like Digital Devil Saga was coming out around then too.
Mm.
That had
Yeah,
really
that was the
interesting
same year I
music.
think as 8 in the US at least.
And it's like these JRPGs are like kind of pushing the limits, like exploring different genres and whatever. And it's like, I'm not saying that Dragon Quest needs to have like post rock battle themes, or like a boss theme that's just like a Midwest emo band, but like this just wasn't really going like to match a Western audience. I think it just like
Yeah.
constantly
And
entrenches it.
and Final Fantasy X is a great example to bring up in comparison because I know Uematsu had his some health concerns at
Mm-hmm.
the time, and that's part of the reason he scaled back and that they brought in some other composers. But also, it just
Umeazu.
evolved with the hardware. It went from the PlayStation to the PlayStation 2, where they could just do kind of anything, and like you were saying earlier, sometimes that leads to a little bit of, for lack of a better word, maybe laziness with the composition, but also yeah, they had the balls to change the sound of Final Fantasy for the
Mm-hmm.
first time, and I really respect that decision. I think that's a great soundtrack for 10. I mean, 13 is one of the more different soundtracks in that
Oh
series.
yeah.
It's one of my favorites. It's an excellent soundtrack, but yeah, Dragon Quest is always going to sound like Dragon Quest, at least so far. So
Right.
I and I'd be lying if I said my nostalgia didn't play a part in my enjoyment of that music. And you're gonna hate me for this, but uh, playing through Dragon Quest XI, I agree 100% that the music is just incredibly repetitive and simple. But at a certain point, it just got in my head in such a way that I was just
Dude.
humming it all the time.
Yeah, same. And I
uh,
think that like, okay, I have spent 32 years trying to inoculate myself from getting earworms so bad that things get stuck. This is why I could like listen to pop music casually and like not want to listen to it, because I could just
so jealous.
cut that out. But like with Dragon Quest, like when it starts to infiltrate your senses, and like it becomes an anxiety response, dude. It's like if I get like anxious about something, like I start thinking about shit like that, or like things that bother me, or like, and, and I just hear like it's like my furnace broke. It
I'll say it's more of a
sucks.
positive sort of earworm for me personally, but it was definitely one of those things where it's just like, okay, I'm sick to death of this music until at a certain point, I don't know if it just there are four lights or something. It just got to me, and it's like, okay, like I love this music. Sugiyama-san, please give me
Holy
more.
shit. Really good
Uh,
reference. Really, and you're catering to me because my dog's name is Riker, so that was
yes,
really good. I
I probably got the
big.
number of lights wrong, but you
No,
got the
you're
reference.
right. You're right. You're 100% right.
Ah,
There are indeed four lights. Uh, but it's really fun. And I just want to clarify that I'm like kind of being performative. Like I don't actually
oh
like
yeah,
hate a lot of this music. Like I played through a lot of 11 too, and I was like, okay, that bops, or like it's not like the music doesn't fit the form or whatever.
mm.
I just like, yeah, I have my reservations. That's all.
And
Uh,
there is a significant amount that's reused, and there's no
yeah.
denying that that's little
That's
bit of a
honestly my
disappointment.
biggest problem. Like more so than personal thing. Like because it's like when you it's not even like you redid the track or rearranged it. You've just straight up fucking copy and pasted that from the mobile version I just played, dude. That
Yep.
like and okay, so I get it in the context of the mobile remix because like there's a lot of songs that like 4 through 6 use from 1 to 3, and I think 6 even uses stuff from 4 and 5. If I could be
Yeah, yeah.
wrong,
Occasionally they do. Yeah.
and it's with sound effects. That's cool. That's awesome. It's consistent. But like, I mean, it was kind of tiring even in those. But like, this is an older game. This is whatever. But when you're taking the same song, literally the same song, copy and paste it into it, it's like, bro, just I just
Yeah,
like want to
it's
I want to
disappointing.
I want to do the Radiohead creep guitar stuff and just like ruin it. Just to ruin it, like maybe make it more interesting. I would just make
I love it.
noise or feedback and throw that on. I don't know. We need Kevin Shields to do a Dragon Quest OST. That's. I honestly, My Bloody Valentine almost sounds like a Dragon Quest subtitle. So it kind of
With the direction that 12 is going in, that just announced, it
yeah.
looks like it's much darker and edgier. So maybe that'll be that.
Let's again because a big part of this series is just the fluidity of the discussion. So let's talk about 12 for a second if you want. What what are your worries for 12, if any?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely have concerns. I have faith with it being Dragon Quest, and them not having deviated much in the past from the norm. That it's still going to look, feel, and sound like Dragon Quest, but I'm definitely concerned with the mature tone that they're focusing on. At least in the presentation that they showed off the logo in, and they talked about it being a more mature, adult-oriented Dragon Quest. Um, my concern with that is I feel like 11 is already a kind of a mature step up for Dragon Quest. There's a lot of dark stuff that happens in that game. It's extremely serious. It's not like a kiddie game by any means. It might look like it at times, but there's a fairly serious tone throughout that game.
Yeah.
So yeah, my concern is that they go too far in that direction, and I don't think that will happen. It's just, yeah, worst case scenario, it will no longer feel like Dragon Quest if they try to make it too mature. And I don't think it's going to be an M-rated game by any means or anything like that. And there's definitely room. Going back to the Toriyama designs, like when you play Dragon Quest 11 or the Heroes games, where it's like the more uh, the better rendered models in those games, and then you see the monster designs next to the human designs. They definitely look goofier when like look at the skeleton, for example. It's like that does not look like the shape of a person in that universe, but it's just kind of its own thing.
And it
So
works well though. It's just so
yeah, it does.
iconic. It sticks with you.
Yeah, it'd just be kind of I don't know if it would be right to use Shin Megami Tensei 4 as a comparison, where they kind of did away with some of those more classic Konako
Right.
designs for the demons, and it was a mixed bag, to be honest. Some of those new designs worked really well, especially I like the bosses, like the Minotaur and the Medusa bosses looked really cool, and then some of them just looked really weird and different for the sake of being different. So, but either way, I would like to see maybe a little bit of a change with that. See maybe a little less goofiness with some of the monster designs, while still maintaining that Dragon Quest sense of humor and pun-oriented naming convention for everything. And it's just such a fun series. But I think at this point we've seen so many of those classic monsters so many times that they could use a little bit of a slightly different take.
So I think there's something something to be said, very much so for the kind of reuse or like seemingly bland things about Dragon Quest. The closest thing I can liken this to is sort of like Citizen Kane, right? So if you have been raised on a steady diet of modern films and you watch Citizen Kane, like most of the time, most people are like, yeah, it's okay. I could see why people like it, but it's just kind of still boring to me, blah, blah, blah. I feel like that's kind of similar with Dragon Quest because a lot of the things that like we take for granted in JRPGs or things that just kind of seem like going through the motions, like the party system, or like the monster catching, or like stuff like your chances or your attacks having such a role in everything that you do. There's so much to this that like all gets kind of traced back to Dragon Quest, and maybe Dragon Quest wasn't the game to introduce it, but it modernized it and it popularized it. So,
Agreed.
and I think a lot of another big barrier of entry for these games, and a common like criticism that I hear that just seems kind of dollar store kind of just thrown away, like copy pasta opinion, is that like all these games are boring, or these games all kind of are do the same thing, and it's like it's not wrong, but it's like myopic.
Yeah. It's
So it's like if you're on the fence about it, I'm sure there are people watching this who like passive Dragon Quest fans, or just don't even care, or maybe they're interested in the series. Like, you just gotta find your own way with it. Like, you just like I guess that's pretentious in a way to be like avoid the fact that you're gonna think this is boring, because then you have to like think about
yeah.
that, and but I don't know.
But you're right. People do take for granted a lot of the refinements uh, to the systems that Dragon Quest used, and those existed in prior games. They were just nowhere near as accessible, and yeah, it's just oversimplifying things to just say that it's boring or lazy when that's really not the case at all. They're just you know what you're going to get from Dragon Quest, and it's always going to be solid. At least it's not. It's going to be the furthest thing from lazy. There's they put a ton of effort into every single one, and refining the combat from game to game, and that's part of what I appreciate about it so much is I know even with say Dragon Quest 11 letting you swap out between like 8 different party members, it still feels exactly like Dragon Quest.
Right.
It never feels like something different.
Yeah, I agree. I
And
think Dragon Quest 11's a really good balancing act in
mm,
that sense. And
yeah,
like you were saying about the tone and the maturity and the darkness of that game's story, I think it's a really good point, and a good discussion topic too, because it's like, okay. So what I always hear, and I'm sure you're familiar with this too, is that like Dragon Quest 5 is like the dark game in the series or whatever. And I agree to some extent, because I think there's a lot of things with 5 that they never quite hit the highs of again. Like there's like
yeah.
such an emotional resonance in some of the story beats in that game
Mhm.
that like I don't think Dragon Quest, like even at the time, like the fact that we never got this in the US really sucks,
Mhm.
because like I feel like that the influence of Dragon Quest 5 was just muted here for that reason. But like, I mean, I just, even 11, which has, and I won't really go into spoilers, but there's a lot of things in 11 that are superficially darker, or maybe not superficially, but are in theory darker in 11 than compared to 5. But I think it's just the way that the game presents itself, the way that the game's story kind of cycles into this like sort of safe kind of thing. It's like it definitely tries to be subversive. It tries to be big, but it ends up being kind of like a sort of a safety net. It ends up falling into kind of a
Yeah,
safety
yeah.
net at one point. And I would like to
Yeah,
see
yeah.
12 remove that a little bit.
Yeah, kind of going back to some of the disparities in tone with especially 11, and as everything advances, it's I always go back to one scene, and without spoiling anything, it's a dark scene that shows uh, some human casualties that a character is walking
Oh
by,
yeah.
and one of those happens to be the Tuffy character, who's like the big bulked up guy in the harness and the iron helmet, and it's so silly to see that in such a serious tone, but it's also I kind of love it and would never change it, but at the same time it's like that's an example of I could see somebody just not taking it seriously at that part and just being like, okay, this is supposed to be serious, and here's this like goofy cartoonish character who's just sitting there dead, and it's all the same models that you've seen throughout the whole game, and I guess there's something to be said for that, um, in terms of conveying the darkness of the tone. uh, it's kind of interesting to see a character like that in that context, but yeah, I could see somebody pointing that out as a criticism for sure.
I'm sorry. I'm laughing because a little fruit fly just landed on your face, and I
Oh
flicked
no.
it. So now you
Ah,
have a
thank you.
dead fruit corpse on
Son of a
your
bastard.
face. Ah, see what you did, Steve? You're stinking so bad. It's coming through the monitor. This is
Oh my gosh.
sorry. No, I think that's a really good example because okay, so I think that's what Dragon Quest does so well. It imparts these really cartoonish moments into mature, like almost vague scenarios like that, right? And I think that that's sort of what Dragon Quest excels at, and what I think it needs to push at a little bit more. And this is why I think five is so emotionally resonant with me because you like five is still goofy as shit. You know, it's like you
Yeah, yeah.
almost it's almost like black humor. Like this is a bit of a spoiler for five. I'm sorry, I just have to bring this up just to kind of like just to to talk about this. Um, there's a part where your character gets turned to stone, and you have to sit there for like not a generation, but like X amount of years. I think it's like 4 years, 5 years. Oh,
Yeah.
that long shit. Um, as this like stone version of yourself, and so you're like kind of watching, but you can't act. Which, damn, that's like Twilight Zone shit. You know,
And it
it's
comes out of
sick.
nowhere too. It's so
Yep,
sudden, such an effective, yeah, moment in that game.
totally. And during that scene, there's like these birds that fly by and land on you, and you know those birds shit all over you. And it's like it's kind of funny, and it's like this zoomed out sort of like I don't know. The tone just zooms out. It becomes like so objectively. I don't know. Just something about it just feels like a little surreal, and like
Mhm.
by that extent, it's like you almost don't know whether or not to laugh or like cry at it, and
Yeah,
that's like
and
to
the way
me,
that it.
that's Dragon
Go ahead.
Quest. That's right. Like like that's what it really. That's when it really hits.
And that's one of my very favorite moments in the series. It's the way that they convey the passage of time is so effective, and
Oh
I
yeah.
love the angry father coming out and beating up the statue and his frustration, and just the tragicness of then what happens after that point, which yeah I won't get into, but that game's yeah very effectively juggles those tones really well, and I think on that point I think Dragon Quest VII does that as well.
Mhm.
Uh, you just have these little kind of poignant vignettes that like the Twilight Zone thing you brought up is a really good comparison. It's like each little island you visit kind of feels like its own little tragic episode, little morality
Oh yeah.
tale. Um, and some of those are just heartbreaking. You know, the one with the robot. That's probably
Oh
all I need
yeah.
to say there. It's
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
just really good stuff and really good subtle storytelling, and a lot of that is conveyed through the mechanics of the what you call it time travel in that game, where you're
Mhm.
you're kind of going back and forth between these periods of time and seeing how everything's changed. Really really well done, and I think 5 and 7 are the best at that. Five in a lot of ways objectively is probably my favorite at this point.
Mhm.
I do have some complaints with kind of not having a constant party throughout the game that you can build. You
Yeah,
have a bunch
I
of
feel that.
characters that are stuck with you for a short period of time, and then they go away, and then it's not really until the last leg of the journey that you really have your full party that you can focus on. And for Dragon Quest, that feels a little weird because there's usually so much grinding involved with everything, but it's a minor complaint. I think the story is so well done, and the journey, and living, seeing the character's entire life throughout the game, it is so well handled for especially something that old. It's incredibly well done.
Yeah, I think 11 almost has that problem too, in a way. And it's because a couple things, and it's like I think 11 juggles it in a really interesting way because the progression of 11 is super detailed. So much thought went into how and when you get things or unlock abilities or skills or like what your threshold is versus the power of the enemies that you're fighting, especially if you're playing on the stronger monsters Draconian Quest, which to me, that's the game, baby. But like, so it's like you get a party member, and then they stick around and they have something new that none of your other party members have. So then it kind of eclipses your other party members. So now you want to use this guy or girl way more than the guy or the old ragged guy or girl you've been having from the beginning of the game or whatever.
Mhm.
And then like something will happen and then you lose that character for a bit or another character joins and you can't switch out. And so it's like it's kind of a similar thing where it's like it constantly keeps the pace like not stagnant. And I think that that's
Yeah.
like it could be frustrating at times, but I do think 11 has a really good balance of it. And like when you start getting like more skill trees that happen as you progress through the game, it just gets more and more like addicting and engrossing, I think. And which brings in aside, it's like if you're playing kind of like a normal, it's like I think a little too easy, so you don't get to experience those subsystems.
Mhm.
And it's like not that I think that that kind of shit should be forced on the player necessarily,
No.
but at the same time, you know, it is kind of a sadness to not be able to interact with that kind of stuff as deeply as you would with the stronger
Yeah.
monsters
Yeah.
there.
I and bringing up the draconian quests, that's such an interesting aspect of 11 because it really is. I do agree with you. That's kind of making it proper Dragon Quest if you turn some of those on. Um, that being said, I think some of them, and I think they might have even removed this from the S version, but there was a draconian quest for not being able to run away from
Oh
battle.
yeah. Hmm.
And a couple hours into the game, there's a boss battle that you cannot win. So if it's like the Black Dragon early in the game, so if the Black Dragon gets into combat with you, you can't run away, but you also can't beat it, and it's just essentially game over. So I think it maybe wasn't quite as thought
Yeah.
out as it should have been for that, which is probably why they removed it. Um, but going back to what you're saying about the characters and the consistency of
Yeah.
the characters,
I forgot
um,
about that.
I think what sums up my feelings on that with that particular game is it has one of my favorite characters and one of my least favorite characters, and they're the same character.
Ooh, which one?
Depending on what Serena. Um,
Oh, I see. Okay.
so
I get
yeah,
where you're going
depending
here.
on what part of the game you're at, she's either one of the best characters, personality wise and abilities wise, or one of the
Hmm.
worst characters. And it's very strange to to look at your party that way. But that's exactly what you were speaking about with the ability tree and all of that, and what the game gives you at what specific time, and it can be completely different.
It just hit me. I realized something. That's really similar to the monsters thing in 5 and
Mm,
onward that has that concept because like, you know, in any game with monsters, like when the Pokemon aspect gets introduced, you get this thing where, you know, again, like the levels, the tiers. Like at one point in the game, you are able to get a monster that's like like so overpowered, and then like at 2 hours later, and it's just kind of okay now, you know. And that kind of happens with characters in 11. So it's kind of that same gameplay dynamic,
yeah.
just displaced rather.
Exactly. Yeah, and I usually prefer that sort of thing with say a Shin Megami Tensei where
Hmm.
I can at least just fuse it immediately and make it stronger. So I know it's not going to stick in my party for too long because I'm constantly fusing them. But
Yeah,
yeah.
I wish. Well, there's a fusing element in Dragon Quest 11, but hey, we're not talking about that. And Gaming the Spoon says he really enjoyed Dragon Quest 11, although he'll be honest, and it was his first. So
Hmm.
that was my girlfriend's first Dragon Quest as well, and she really liked it. And I think Dragon Quest 11 may be the best first Dragon Quest. It's not like a series like Final Fantasy where things are just so drastically different, or like the gameplay is so unbelievably different, or like the tone is so, you know, jarring and disparate. Uh, so I, you know, Dragon Quest is like I never get, I guess, passionate about saying which Dragon Quest should I start with. It's not like Ease or even Final Fantasy where, you know, I could sit here and make a 2.5 hour podcast about why I think you should start with this game, right? But Dragon Quest
Or you
11,
need
it's like,
someone's personality test in order to determine
dude,
which one.
yes, no, I'm like, there's so many games. Like, I said something on Twitter to somebody about Dragon Quest 1 because they hadn't played it and they had a Switch. And I was like, "Guys, just play Dragon Quest One. Yeah, just do it. Like, just do it. Whatever." And someone hits me with a, "Well, actually, this is a really bad place to start." Because,
Oh no.
and it's like, first of all, I know, and secondly, like I'm considering the context of the person, which I don't think that
Yeah.
person did, and I get that stuff so often. I see that with like, okay, I have strong opinions about like where people should start with like Mega Man or Ease, but I have never once done that. Like I have never once
Yeah.
like been like, well, actually, you gotta like it's just like nothing puts people off from wanting to start a series or a game quite like something like that, unless like you get
Yeah.
off on like conflict or something.
Yeah. Recommend that. If that doesn't do anything for them, then ask them what they disliked about it, and then you can go from there. But yeah, I don't see. There's no bad place to start with the series. I do agree that 11 is the best to start.
Mm-hmm.
I nine times out of 10, if someone asks me, I will tell them 8 or 11 is the best to start with because they're both
Same.
kind of similar in that they're flashy, they're kind of more focused on the presentation, they're fully voice acted, at least in the US. They're just very accessible games for the series, and they introduce you to the world uh, in a pretty effective manner.
Mm-hmm.
So those are my two that I always go with.
Yeah, I think Dragon Quest Three, the remake, or the Dragon Quest Three, the remake of Dragon Quest Three is probably going to be a really good entry point too, because just from what we've seen from it, that's a good segue because we're talking about the new shit,
Hmm.
and then but I think it's going to be a good segue because like from what we've seen in the trailer, there seems to be on map encounters in there, which is another one of the reasons why I'd recommend 11 or 8 to somebody who's never played the series. Because like just like an umbrella generalized, what's the best place to start? I think those two are really good for that reason.
Hmm.
But like it's like you said, it's like it depends on the person. It's like if I know somebody likes random encounters, I'm like, hey, maybe 3 or 1 is a good place to start. But
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, it is what it is. But yeah, so it's like Spoons. If you're still listening, man, like do what thy heart says. With if you're interested in the series, um, go. It's definitely like a fun series to. It's super fun to explore.
Yeah.
Right.
And we haven't even discussed 9, which is one of the more unique
Yeah.
entries in the series. And also, I think that's a pretty good starting place for people. Um, for one thing, it's portable and it's 100% made to be portable.
Mhm.
It's that's the one that I believe it was developed to be just an action game rather than a turn-based game, and then the fan backlash in Japan caused them to turn around and just make it a traditional uh, turn-based combat system. So I think it works really well in that regard. I would have liked to have seen what Level 5 could have done with Dragon Quest as an action game, but it's one of my favorites in the series, as I've said about all of them. But um, in particular, I have very fond memories of the fan events that Nintendo put together for Dragon Quest IX, which I went to a couple of those at like GameStop or Best Buy, where all the fans would get together and you would just share the downloadable maps that you could earn in the game. So,
It's so
and it's the only way you
sick.
could. Oh, it's
So
amazing.
sick.
It's the
I'm
only way
so
that you
sad I
could
didn't get to see
fight.
that.
Oh, yeah, some of the post game bosses that you encounter are
That's what I hear.
classic Dragon Quest characters like Zoma or Necrosaro, characters like that, and you could only encounter them through these maps that uh, you would either find randomly, you'd have a small chance of getting randomly, or you'd have to trade them with another player. So it was a really good opportunity to both meet Dragon Quest fans, which there weren't too many of them at that
Yeah.
point. So it's like,
Yeah.
oh, they do exist. There's other people in my area who like this series. And it was really nice to get to chat with them and also to trade maps and just even kind of play the game for a couple hours together in the co-op mode. It was just a really fun experience.
Until fucking Greg rolls in with his tattoo sleeve of
uh,
every slime that's ever been in Dragon Quest and drops you off into a fight that you're not ready to fight yet.
Goddamn Greg Reese. Well, there was maybe his name was Greg Reese, but there was a guy who showed up, and it's like, hey, guys, I got the metal Kingsline dungeon, and it was almost like a drug, him supplying it to everybody because it's the way that you could just grind
Oh, I
every
heard about
class up to level
this.
99. Yeah, it was
I
amazing,
heard
but
about.
just one guy, and he probably like hacked
So
it
good.
with a Game Shark or something at
Hmm.
the time, but it
Loser,
was still funny. Oh yeah,
cheater.
that Greg.
Fucking
No
Greg.
disrespect, whoever gave that to me. That was thank you very much.
Well, it's
uh,
actually kind of awesome. So I like Dragon Quest Nine a lot, but I think one of the reasons why I think I like it more in theory because I see how much potential that stuff had, and I also like I'm a little bit biased because I really like the more open-ended Dragon Quests where you get to have a lot of control over your party. And I really wanted that for 11, but then like 11 does actually give you a lot of freedom with the way you build your characters, but like
yeah,
it's not like 3 where you get to like literally choose your party or whatever. So I really like that about 9. I thought that was great, and some of it gets a little boring, sure, but I don't know, just something like the whole appeal of that game is so multifaceted, and I think I don't think that there's a better candidate for a port or a remake than Dragon Quest Nine. And
yeah,
it's
I
when
would
we
love
were
to see it.
when I was watching the live stream, the Dragon Quest live stream, and they showed the Dragon Quest Ten offline version, you know, I was like, dude, is that a port of Nine?
Yeah, the thought went through my mind as well. It's
And then yeah,
uh,
and yeah, Spoons Nine was multiplayer. It had a really unique multiplayer system. It sucks. It's like I think you can spoof the events with some wizardry.
yeah,
Uh,
yeah. I've heard to varying success. A lot of the people I know who've tried to get all that stuff working, it had no luck, but there are methods out there.
sure, and so it's like, I mean, do you want to really make that effort? Maybe not, but even if you don't, I think the game is super enjoyable, or at least it was for me. I still had a lot of fun with the critical path of that game, but I do
Mhm.
hear that it like quadruples in in playability once you do the multiplayer post game stuff.
Yeah, yeah. And some of it, it's almost necessary if unless you have that Metal King Slime dungeon, then you're gonna have a rough time going through some of those dungeons with just your own party. It's nice to have somebody else and their main character who has the mixture of all the different classes and everything. So, yeah, just a really unique multiplayer experience. Even though I didn't get to play much of it, I had a friend that I'd play with occasionally, but we didn't play through the entire game together or anything like that.
Rip. Yeah,
But
so
yeah,
that was
that's
like such a weird time in gaming though, because like
mhm.
I feel like Nintendo just like it had a big casual audience then, like because the Wii was really popular and super prolific, and but I think that like a lot of enthusiasts kind of skipped out on that sort of era or that time, and
Yeah.
especially with me because like all my friends back then started to sort of grow up from gaming and whatever. So I didn't really like all the people like I grew up with playing games, like just kind of stopped doing that. And there wasn't really like online in that in like a coherent way. So you could play. So I just never really got, I didn't buy Dragon Quest 9 until 2 years ago. So I really slept
Okay.
on it.
Yeah, so you missed it. And part of what I really liked about that game was the unique Street Pass functionality for the
Oh, yeah.
DS. Is the best usage of that I had seen, at least, where you could just uh you'd go to the inn, put the system in sleep mode essentially, and just drive around town and see if you'd pick up somebody else's DS, and they would appear as somebody in your inn, and you would get an item from them, or it depended. I think you'd get prizes depending on how many visitors you had at your
Oh,
inn. So
okay.
it's like, okay, well, I encountered 40 people in Street Pass, so now I can dress my character like Elena from Dragon Quest IV, and little things like that. It was such a cool little touch, and going to these events, and you'd put it in sleep, and all of a sudden you just have immediately 40 new visitors. It was a really cool thing that I wish the Switch would take advantage of, but we haven't really seen that yet in a Switch game.
I love the introduction of a real life mini game in Dragon Quest, like walking around Chicago, like trying to ding people on the street pass. Dragon Quest
Yeah, and it is or it was difficult to get any sort of any sort of reaction with that. It was made
Yeah,
for
without it.
Japan, which is so densely populated, and traveling around Phoenix, we don't have a great public transit system or anything, so I'd really just have to uh, park outside GameStop like a creep for a few minutes and then just slowly go in reverse and go away. It's like, oh, and that was really the best method of getting street passes at the time. It was kind of sad, but
And it was really tough
you know,
because you were a registered sex offender at the time, and it was
yeah.
just really difficult to. Yeah, it's.
Oh no. Oh,
Man, I hate going to GameStop. I'll be real with you. Like,
I do too.
I never liked it. I thought the release events were kind of cool. Like when they actually implemented something into them. Like the Pokemon ones had like little tournaments, or Smash had little tournaments. But like
Yeah.
I hate
Yeah, about one of the only really great experiences I had at GameStop was that Dragon Quest IX event. Otherwise, I tend to avoid that store. Even though I've met plenty of great people who worked there. No offense to them. It's just that store
Yeah,
in
it's not.
general just irks me beyond belief. But
Yeah, I never blame employees for the shitty corporate
yeah,
overlords who dictate their future. So, yeah,
that's
yeah.
unfortunate.
But yeah, no, I see a lot of hate for nine, and just out of curiosity, I did it. I did like a field poll, right? Some field research, and I was like, "Oh, what's your favorite Dragon Quest on Twitter?" And I got a lot of really interesting responses. I got a lot more four than I thought.
Four is a favorite of mine as well. In some ways it's my favorite. It's the one I'm most nostalgic for. But I'm happy to hear that a lot of other people like that one.
Four, and again, I love all Dragon Quests. They're all really good. I do think four is probably my least favorite next to two.
Hmm.
So,
Is it because of the AI companions?
that's a problem, but like, it's kind of just. I don't really think there's a lot of innovation in anything but the scenario system.
Hmm. Which
And
was
I,
very unique at the time, at
oh
least. But
yeah,
yeah,
and that is
nowadays.
cool. And the characters are really cool too. Like they're just really well done. And I'm doing that thing where I just say things are cool again. But when it's the characters are very interesting, and you have Proto Sephiroth in Pizarro, and it was interesting to see like, wow, what's the merchant Torneco, is that his name?
Torneco, yeah.
To like
Or
have a
Tulun in the old one.
oh to yeah, that was his name. To have his like little shop mini game be a thing that you could break the game with, like FF8 style. Um, and I love stuff like that. I think that adds a lot of unique experience or individual experience while with playthroughs. Just something about the way you progress through the world feels like kind of segmented, and like, and they're all like this, sure, but it just doesn't really feel as, especially with how open 3 was and
Mhm.
how much freedom you had. It felt like a step back in that sense. I didn't really care about the story too much, except Bizarro is awesome. I'll give him that.
Yeah. Well, it
So
kind of
yeah,
goes
that's
back to
that's my
what we were
complaint.
saying about five, yeah, or 11 with you're building up these characters and then you stop playing as them up until chapter 5 when they all reunite, which
Hmm.
at this point, yeah, we've seen the chapter system in so many other RPGs, but just a kind of personal story of when I first played that game, which I was just obsessed with Dragon Quest IV when it first came out. Um, as a poor kid, though, I couldn't purchase it. I had to rent it from Blockbuster, and I rented it over and over and over. Um, but I had very limited time to play games, so I couldn't get that far into it. So I'd rent it um, week after week and get a little bit further. I'd basically beat a chapter with each rental, and by the time I got to chapter 4, then the next time I rented it, all of a sudden my character was halfway through chapter 5. Somebody else
Oh, then they
had,
continued. You,
yeah,
Greg.
someone took over my character. It's like the adventures of Stev were completed by somebody else, but so it was a very odd thing because for that version of the game, unlike the remakes, I don't think there's a prologue where you play as the hero or where they indicate that you're going to have everyone together and continue this story. So it was mind blowing to me to see all of these characters together with their little wagon and everything, and it was just such a cool touch to that game that made it really unique at the time.
Oh yeah.
That being said, I really dislike the AI in that game, which is forced
Mhm.
upon you in the original at least.
Yeah.
Yeah, the amount of times that Kiro slash Christo will just try to thwack the enemy to no avail is just embarrassing. Just give it up.
And that's one of my least favorite things about Dragon Quest, honestly, gameplay wise, is the RNG in a lot of things. It doesn't, just so much shit can miss. Oh, Steve is out. He did not like that statement. He just decided he was through with this podcast after that.
You said one too many bad things about
Yeah,
Dragon
one.
Quest.
First it was the music, and now it's the RNG. But yeah, so that gets frustrating. I don't think it's like game breaking or like totally awful, but
Mhm.
I do like, because it's like the my biggest. Everyone always bitches about like their zing being like a chance or RNG after two,
Mhm.
and I don't. That doesn't bother me as much. What bothers me is the speed variance, because it's
Yeah.
like, if let's just say you have 94 agility and the enemy has 27 agility, there's still a chance, however small, that the enemy can go first. And that
Yeah.
like kind of messes with a lot of your strategy. You have to like play super safe if you're under leveled. It's like it adds the wrong element of player choice. Actually, it doesn't really have a player choice so much as like it forces the player to play a certain way, which
Yeah.
I'm not a big fan of. And I do think that's prevalent across all of Dragon Quest. So I don't know what the answer to that necessarily is. That might just be a preference thing. That might just be something that Dragon Quest will always have that I just
Yeah.
won't fully vibe with. So
It keeps you on your toes, but it's very frustrating. And I think we discussed this with the Romancing Saga 2 podcast as well. It's the same issue that series
yes.
has, and it drives me crazy as well.
Yeah,
I'll
I
be
think
honest.
it's almost worse in Saga because, or you feel it more in Saga because, like, big things that could, like, you could just miss a stun and then your whole party's dead.
Yeah,
you know?
you count on one action, and um, yeah, getting into other gameplay gripes for the series, and this isn't really one of mine personally, but it seems to be a um, common criticism with a lot of fans is that just at a certain point, bosses will start having multiple attacks. And it's just one
Oh, yeah.
boss, but it's just you hit a barrier, and all of a sudden a boss will attack two, maybe even three times. And I've never had an issue with that personally, but how do you feel about that in the series?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think that goes down to the RNG thing because I think even that's a matter of RNG. Like, even the turns. I mean, yeah, you're right. There's like a threshold where it goes from, it's like a binary scale from going from one attack to multiple attacks. But I think there is an RPG like you could have, or RNG, where they can either have two or three, and then that makes it even more
Yeah,
confusing.
yeah.
This is really, so yeah. This is a good little bridge here. So Dragon Quest II has a very notorious final boss that can heal itself to full randomly, and
It's infuriating. Yeah, and you have to go through such a gauntlet to get to that boss as well. So it's just it. Oh, Malroth.
it
Malroth is
gets
the
kind of
worst.
fixed in the remakes. It does get fixed in the remakes, but it's just still like, bro.
Yeah.
Also, so again, this is me playing on stronger monsters, so maybe I signed up for this kind of thing. I had two deaths, two game overs during that because I took my sweet ass time and was very meticulous. But I had two game overs. Once was to a pack of slimes in the beginning of the game
Oh
because I was
no.
like, "Yo, these are
Well,
slimes. I don't care that I'm playing on this mode," and they just fucked me up, bro. Like the battle started and just like I was just getting blasted. I didn't. I had the thing where I couldn't run away, so it was just like, guess I die. Another one was a green dragon in like the ruins area. So
mhm.
this is bullshit. This is like SMT bullshit. So match started. He gets a free attack. KO's one party member. Tail swipes. Immediately goes again. tail swipes, hits the other party member, they die. I literally couldn't move. I didn't even have the
Dragon
move.
Quest 2 for you.
Yeah, and that was 11.
Oh, that was 11.
Yeah,
I'm sorry. Okay.
yeah.
I was thinking 2.
But I mean, that could happen in 2. I actually, this almost happened in 2 in my recent playthrough, which is like 2 days ago. Toward the end of the game, I think it was Cave Tyrone, actually. There's like these magician guys who can cast Sizzle. And like, they got a surprise attack. 2 of them sizzled for like 80% of my HP. And then they got another turn. And then like almost killed me. So I was like, dude, I can't. I have to run. So I ran and I got lucky. But I was so mad.
That the Cave to Roan, I forget what they're called exactly. The Silva Pithecus, the white baboon looking enemies,
Oh,
the winged
yeah.
baboons.
Mm-hmm.
I think those are the ones that cast like an instant death spell on you.
Yeah.
And it's either in the Cave to Roan or just
Oh
after.
no, it's after. It's the blue spirit guys who can just whack your whole party and then you lose it.
It's the worst. Oh my gosh. And yeah, speaking of RNG, it's like if they go twice in a row and you only have 2 party members left, there's a good chance you're just wiped. That's it.
And the adding more RNG is the random encounters in those games, because you can like get Vegas level luck and go through whole floors without getting an encounter, or you can just like step after step after step, like just. And the remakes fix this a little bit, because the RNG in the remakes isn't true RNG. It's like kind of scaled, just like most RNG ever is. But like, yeah, it's so frustrating.
Yeah, that it's infamous, the Cave Tyrone and the area afterwards, where it's just it is such a gauntlet. And they do give you a save point, to be fair,
True.
just before the final castle, which is strangely generous for a game of that era, but. Boy, yeah, you run into the wrong pack of monsters and you're just doomed, and then you have to go through several mini bosses before you even get to Hargon and Malroth, and it's brutal.
Yeah, that's. I actually figured out this run. This is a pro tip for all the gamers out there. You can dazzle the final boss of Dragon Quest II, and he just like, and there's RNG in that too, because it's like a hit chance. And then there's an RNG of like the roll of his dazzle, like doing 0 damage or normal damage. But yeah, that actually works really well. So if you abuse dazzle and snooze, Dragon Quest II is a dazzling snooze.
Oh no. Oh.
I'm gonna leave now.
Oh boy. Goodbye, folks.
Oh god, I hate myself.
I think Discord's cutting out again. Bye.
Yeah, shit.
Oh.
But yeah, I think that 2 and maybe even parts of 7 are really the only game. I mean, there's bullshit in every game to some extent. 3 has that pyramid area.
Oh, yeah,
where
the pyramid
it just
is
like, oh
yeah.
no. Really good question. From Gaming with Spoons. Also, we kind of talked about this earlier, but he asks, what's the best version of 1 and 2 to play? I personally will say play the Switch or the mobile version, which is based on the Super Famicom release of 1 and 2 that we never got here.
Yeah.
It has a quick save option that allows you to save anywhere, and it's not one of those that like deletes your save when you resume it. So it's just a save option. You can save anywhere. And Steve was saying earlier he's not a big fan of some of the visuals. I think the Switch version of it actually has smoothened sprites. The mobile version of 1 and 2 is actually like they're pixels. You can see the pixels.
Yes. So yeah, I would say maybe they did redo some of the monster art as well, right? For the Switch version, it looks a little bit
seems like it.
more stylized. I think the Switch version is fine. I think the quality of life improvements that you were discussing, like the quick save, is great and all, but at this point, if you have the ability to easily just play a Super Famicom ROM, I would say go with those versions. Those are my favorite, at least.
Yeah, I think that's fair, because I feel like the Super Famicom versions do feel like a little bit more representative of the original 1 and 2 experience, as opposed to the modern conveniences of the Switch and mobile. But I do think And Spoons, I know you're a busy guy. You work a lot and you stream and whatever. Um, I would say just go with the Switch version, honestly, unless you really want that like kind of more puristic.
Yeah. It really depends on where you're coming from. You can't go wrong with those versions. They're still fine representations of those games. And again, you get the best version of that music, even if you
Oh,
dislike
that too.
Sugiyama's compositions. It's very high quality renditions of those old tracks. So yeah, the Switch version, it's also frequently on sale. So yeah, go with that, I'd say.
This may come
Now
as
for
a
three,
surprise. They don't use the
oh,
NES versions of the tracks in the.
oh no, yes, it is not actual, not authentic 8-bit chiptune music, unfortunately. But I I think the the upgrade is worth it. I think. For three though, I definitely prefer the Super Famicom version. I do really like the prologue with the hero's father. I like um, I like Pachisi, the game of the kind of lifestyle or Fortune Street style board game. I know you already said you hated that,
I
right?
fucking hate it, and
Okay,
you're
I
wrong.
don't know what it is, but I like Pachisi. I've always liked that edition, and it feels a little weird to not have that. You also have like an extra bonus dungeon, I think, that they cut out of the Switch version,
Yeah,
but that's
the
yeah, it doesn't add a lot to it, to be honest. So that's
yeah,
not that big of a deal. Do they have the thief class
yeah.
in? Okay, as long as
Mhm.
you got that, then you have the big uh, actual change that impacts the game. So that's really just a matter of preference on if you want to see all the content, or also a big thing is monster animations. That's pretty big
Yeah,
to me.
yeah. I would say so. So one and two, I feel like you play the Switch version or mobile versions or a Switch version.
Yeah.
Uh,
I've played a little bit of all three.
for those two, I for one and two, I would say like it's not that big of a deal. Just play the Switch version. You're not really missing out on that much. But with three, I think it gets a little bit more complicated. I disagree a little bit. I do still think that the Switch version of three is a really good place to start. It actually looks better than one and two because the sprites are smaller
It
in
does.
scale. So the
Yeah,
smoothing doesn't look like someone just like rubbed Vaseline all over that shit.
and it's a little less choppy too with the scrolling for whatever reason. So
Where yeah,
yeah,
so yeah, that's a consideration. Pachisi does sound like a Sopranos character. Also,
it does. It really does.
I
Somebody whacked the cheesy.
yeah,
uh,
whatever Matrix or no, dot emu, uh, dot emu whacked Pachisi. So there we go. Also,
uh,
there's also the Game Boy Color version,
mhm.
which like I know people love this version. I think it's a great port. But
Yeah,
I wouldn't really say that's the best place to start with it. But you know what? It really doesn't matter. Like if it's like a convenience thing for you, if you feel like you would rather play the Switch version or the mobile version, because like the portability would help you get into the game more, like just help you whatever. You're not really gonna be like kicking yourself that much, like. But yeah, I do think the Super Famicom version with a English patch is the best.
yeah. For
The
for
best.
any of those games, I think portability makes them just so much better an experience. So that's really for any of the original two trilogies, 1 through 6. Just play them portable, however you can. Even 7 and 8. 8, I think I definitely slightly prefer the PlayStation 2 version. It looks a little bit better. It sounds a lot better. But they did add quite a bit of content to that for the 3DS version. So again, portability adds a lot to the series. There's a lot of times where, especially with the post game stuff, you're going to be grinding, and so it really benefits to be able to take that on the go and just grind a few levels wherever you are.
Definitely, yeah. I think Dragon Quest really so much because I played Dragon Quest 11 on PS4 first, and my girlfriend played it on Switch, and I was kind of like jealous. I was like, I
Yeah,
wish I could
yeah,
have just
same
like
here.
taken a bath. With the and Spoons also says he bought the mobile versions a while ago, but he's scared of the mobile
Okay.
version. So I touched on this earlier as well, but I fucking hate touchscreen, dude. I can't stand it. That being said, actually don't mind it in these games because there's nothing that's ever really reactive. There's a part in 2 where you could very easily fall off a side and have to redo a whole dungeon, but you
And
can
that
kind of
cave to Roan has a lot of pits in it.
hmm.
Yeah.
But a quick
Uh,
save is an option to help circumvent that if it makes it easier
yeah.
for you. That being said, though, I don't. It depends on your tolerance for that kind of thing. To be honest, like, I don't think it's like I'm not the David Lynch type with older games. I'm not like if you think that you've played a game on your fucking phone, get real. I
Yep.
don't think that's necessarily the case with these games, but yeah, I mean, like, even with the updated audio, like playing through a phone speaker is kind of whack. Like it's just not sounds like poo.
Yeah, as somebody so nostalgic for these old games, I never thought I would enjoy the mobile versions, but I had a good time playing them when I did. So you get past the the quirks of them pretty quickly. I'll say that much.
Totally, and I will say because this is a really convenient answer for you. Oh, I have stubby fingers, dude. I'm right with you. The guitar is so much harder for me because of my stubby finger. But anyway, the if you have the mobile versions, just try them. Try Dragon Quest 1, see if you like it. And if it's too much, if it's annoying as shit, just switch over to the Switch version. They're usually pretty cheap, and
Yeah.
if you find the game intriguing in any way and the controls are too much of an annoyance, yeah, it's like Dragon Quest 1 is also pretty short, so if you do like, if you're worried about like your stuff not transferring over, or like, I'm 3 hours into the game, I don't want to start over, it's not that big of a deal in that game.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, so I'm glad that you asked this because it gave us a chance to talk more in depth about that. And also, man, so you mentioned, let's back up a little bit about the 8 port for 3DS,
Hmm.
right? So I played the PS2 version, but I didn't get very far in it, and I don't really remember that much about it. Um, were there on map encounters in that?
Not in the PS2 version. So that's
That's what
another.
I
I should have
thought.
pointed that out. That's only in the 3DS version.
Okay.
So if that's a deal breaker for you, definitely go with the 3DS if you want the map encounters. Um, there's also an extra party member, or two
Oh
extra
yeah.
party members um, you can recruit. There's a new ending. There's a significant amount of content. It just like looks and
It looks
sounds
weird.
worse, but
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah, I agree. It looks like I don't know. It's got that like Matrix software look. I don't even know if they did that game, but
yeah,
like
they might have helped with the port, to be honest. I'm not sure,
yeah.
but it does. I know what you mean with that. Um,
And
yeah,
for
it's
those that
it's an
don't, for those who don't know, Matrix Software did like the 3D ports or the 3D versions of FF3 and FF4, and I really like their approaches to um, modernizing gameplay
yeah,
in old stuff. But sometimes the visuals,
yeah, they did a lot with that hardware, with the original DS hardware. But yeah, when just Dragon Quest 8, similar to 11, just feels like such a big epic experience to me. It just feels really odd playing that on a handheld, but a lot of people enjoyed it just as much as I did playing it on the PS2 that way. So, uh, also, if you really care, the music is the MIDI version in the 3DS version as
mm-hmm,
opposed to the orchestral music
which
in the
sucks.
PS2 version. Yeah, it's a pretty big downgrade there, but everything else, uh, if all you want is the content, I know it's contradictory to what I said about Dragon Quest 3, then the 3DS version is the way to go. But maybe it's because I have such fondness for the PS2 version. I'm okay with that version being my go-to. But
The good
yeah,
thing about hating on Sugiyama is that I don't care that much about the music.
yeah, I was gonna say if you don't like the compositions to begin with, the 3DS version is perfect to jump into.
Wait,
uh,
there's one other thing too. It's voice acting. I think.
mhm.
Was there? I don't. I just played it 2 years ago. I don't think there's voice acting in the 3DS. Is there?
I thought there was, from unless I'm just
Maybe.
misremembering it, but I think there's voice acting in the 3DS version.
Okay, let me. I'm just gonna Google this really fast because
Yeah.
like now I feel like I have. Um. Oh, okay. It says that some dialogue was may have been re-recorded.
Okay, yeah, I definitely remember it because that would have been a major deal breaker for me because I really liked the voice acting in the PlayStation 2 version. I think that was really well done. Added so much character to that game.
Oh, for sure. I know that that's like kind of a hot subject for Japanese audiences because Japanese audiences
Mhm.
didn't have a voiced Dragon Quest until 11S.
Yeah, and I don't know how well received
Oh wait,
that
no PS4.
was.
No
I don't
PS4.
recall hearing any controversy um after the 11S voice acting, but yeah, that's first time ever that they got proper voice acting in a full Dragon Quest game.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, which is kind of that's so wild. It's so wild to me. But you know what? I get it though because I remember FF10 coming, and again, sorry for the Final Fantasy comparisons. I know we
Oh yeah.
both didn't want to do that, but like with FF10, it was like the first time that a Final Fantasy was voiced, and it was such a big, insane thing to me at the time. So I'd imagine that like with a franchise that's even more traditional, it's that's crazy to think about.
Yeah.
So yeah, all right, let's step back one entry, and I want to talk about seven a little bit because we kind of
Mhm.
touched on seven, but
Yeah.
not much. Um, what about seven's 3DS version? How do you feel about this? Oh, you mentioned that you
I
liked
think
it more, but
yeah, I
in
think
more
it's an
detail.
excellent remake. It's uh 7 is one of the more divisive entries in the series amongst fans. I think it's maybe a little bit of a love it or hate it game. It's the longest Dragon Quest by far. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
a regular, a casual run through 7 on the PlayStation will take you maybe like 100 to 120 hours or so,
Yeah.
and that's not even counting the post game content, the added super bosses and everything. It's a little bit of a slog at times. I think I really like the narrative of that game, but so much of it is spent hunting down these little fragments, and if you miss one in an area and you move on, it could take you hours to track it down, and even with a FAQ, it might take hours to track it down. So the 3DS version just alleviates all of that. It gives you uh, a fragment tracker, I believe. It's just a much more streamlined experience overall. It also
Yeah.
looks and sounds quite a bit better in my opinion. You actually have visual representations of the classes, which the job system or class system in that game is a major part of it. So it's kind of nice to see your characters change appearance with their classes. It's just it, and that's a double-edged sword with some of those improvements because part of the fun for me with the original version of Dragon Quest VII is being able to break the game with a certain combination of abilities. So they fixed that with the 3DS version, and you no longer have some of those hybrid class abilities. I don't think you have the sword dance, which is one that I heavily relied upon, but it's still just a very good overall improved experience.
Word, and I just want to real fast. We had some issues with the stream.
Oh,
Just
sure.
it got all messed up. No, you're fine. The audio, like the VOD, will be fine, but it looks like the stream may be choppy. So if
Okay.
sorry for this for people who are watching. I'm working on it. I want to
Yeah, if
kill
anyone
my
has a question.
ISP. Yeah.
Ah,
But yeah, so I'll just continue as if there's no issues because the whole as it is a podcast in theory. Trying to do damage control here. But yeah, no, this. So I never really got very far in the PlayStation 1 version of 7. I kind of hated it, to be
mm,
honest.
I could see, and yeah, it's again, love it or hate it.
Yeah, and so that was it was a little bit sort of. I was kind of scared to go back to it when I was replaying or when I was playing the series, and I don't even think I got further than a couple hours. I don't even think that even happened.
So you might not have even gotten to combat in that game.
Oh yeah, literally. Yeah, you don't like. First of all, you don't even get the job system to like an entire RPG's worth of time
hmm hmm
in that game.
Yeah, I
Um,
mean it's very notorious for how long it takes to get to the first battle with the slime in the original version, whereas the 3DS remake cuts out a lot of that. And uh, I'll be honest, I kind of like the build up. I like
mhm.
the mysterious build up to the ruins that it's yeah, like you said, it's almost like it's just an RPG without combat up until that point. It's its own game, and then and then all of a sudden it feels like a Dragon Quest game when you encounter the slimes, and yeah, there's just such a slow burn in that game. It's kind of crazy.
Yeah, it's like you really have to have a lot of patience to enjoy 7.
Mhm.
And sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. Um, I kind of I was fortunate enough to have understood this before going into the game because I had read a little bit about it, and so for me it was like there is that pretension with 7 that like you need to know that this game is slow as shit. It's glacial.
Mhm.
And I think more often than not it works because you really feel the duration of things. You get antsy for combat. You anticipate more. And it adds this really interesting dynamic. But apart from the really awesome handful of side quests in that game that we talked on a little bit earlier, I just like really have trouble engaging with that narrative. It just seems a
Mhm.
little too vanilla, and all it needed was just like some sprinkles. You know, that's
Yeah,
like
yeah,
so it's like I love Dragon Quest 7. I think it's like I think that's another like kind of misunderstood game for
yeah.
sure. But in the grand scheme of things, like do I don't know if I could replay it like in the next 10 years for
It's
that
yeah,
reason.
it definitely has a different feel. I think it's very much geared towards like classic Dragon Quest fans who just can't get enough of the tinier uh, details of Dragon Quest. It's like, okay, I enjoy going into a room and searching all the pots, all the cabinets, and all of that. It's like, okay, you want to do that for 100 hours? Here you go. It's just, it really is kind of that. And it's like you look at every nook and cranny of every single town, every single room, and it's part. It's necessary. It's not just to get extra, to get mini medals or anything like that. You have to collect these fragments, the stone fragments that you use to create other worlds to travel to, other islands, and it that can wear down on you even if you're enjoying the experience, and especially the PlayStation version at about like shortly before you get to the classes being unlocked, it can feel like a slog. And I do enjoy the experience overall, but I don't particularly care for that group of characters. I
Yeah.
think they're visually dull, to be
Yeah.
honest. I know that might be a little bit controversial to say as someone who's part of the Dragon Quest community, but I really don't like a lot of the designs in that game, and the characters aren't that interesting on top of that to me.
Yeah, no, I visually so I think all the DS versions, I'm not a big fan of how they look. And that extends to I kind of actually think the mobile versions look better, to be honest. I think that
Mm,
the style like kind of works a little bit better for it. Uh but I'm just not a fan of how they look, and it kind of just feels like everything is sort of it almost feels like RPG Maker esque at
I could
times.
see that, yeah.
And that was like kind of a big thing with 7 because there's not like a lot of visually distinctive things in that game that like really stand out. Like the whole setting is sick. Big fan of floating islands, man. Like one of my that's like I'm a simp with that. Um, so that's sick. But other than that, yeah, I think like I just really want ports of 4 through 9.
4 through 6. Oh
Yeah,
yeah, yeah.
or even
That's yeah. At
four
this
through six,
point,
I'd be happy with.
it's crazy to think of that. Yeah.
And
uh,
and it's like I think that goes. It's weird because on one hand, it's like okay, Dragon Quest is not a series like Final Fantasy that's like we said before, drastically and incredibly different with each different settings. Like it's not that different. So in a way, having all Dragon Quest games on one platform feels like less of a incredible goal, I guess, than like having all Final Fantasy games or all Zelda games or whatever. Even though Zelda's probably in the same category here, but
and
So, but yeah, I still want to see it, and I'm hoping that like a 3 remake really pushes Square Enix to move forward with that. Uh, I want to talk a little bit about 6 before we kind of
Yeah, we
wrap up and like talk a
completely
little.
skipped over 6.
Yeah. But I did this purposely because I think I may actually replay it like
Okay.
soon, like within like the next day or two, or at least start it. Uh, 6 is like, okay, it's good. It's not a bad game. It's just kind of it definitely is the most going through the motions
Hmm.
of Dragon Quest, I think. But like the class system that gets implemented, like around the halfway point or well, however far into the game,
Yeah.
is really cool, and it's like that adds a lot of like almost 3 esque freedom to it.
Yeah.
Uh,
It
yeah,
it all just kind of feels like a strangely disjointed experience. I do like 6, but even going to the difficulty of the game, it's like it's probably the easiest game in the series.
yeah,
It's just everything is a cakewalk, and then you get to a boss, and all of a sudden you have to actually put some thought into it. And even the bosses aren't that difficult, to be honest. But it's just a strange experience. It's a beautiful game. It's
oh yeah,
you could play the Super Famicom version of that, and it looks amazing. It's one of the best, if not the best looking Super Famicom games. So it's yeah, you can't go wrong with either version of it. I do think the DS improvements, the quality of life improvements, make that and the mobile version obviously make those the ones to play over the Super Famicom version. But yeah, I agree with all of your criticisms. It's just there's nothing glaringly wrong about it.
yeah.
It's just more Dragon Quest, and
It's the Mega
that's
Man
fine for me.
5 of Dragon Quest
Yeah,
to me.
perfectly stated. Yep.
So like, all right, I love the Super Famicom visuals. I haven't played the Super Famicom version, sadly. Um, I did this thing where I was like playing it on my phone and watching a Let's Play that was like 30 minutes behind me. So I was like, oh, I just saw that. Cool, that looks so much better. And that's another case where the mobile version is just like it just kind of and the DS version destroys a lot of the aesthetic of the
Mm.
game. I think,
Yeah,
and it's like,
yeah,
man, it's like I keep getting into this thing where it's like I just want remasters or ports to be the same visuals.
yeah. It has such beautiful pixel art for the backgrounds and everything, and I think the one thing that carries over really well in all of the remakes is the enemy animations
Yeah.
and how they look, but
Okay.
everything
Yeah.
else there's
Definitely.
just kind of that muddy 3D look to it, especially when you spin the map around. I think that's like I'm trying to think of the developer's name, Arte Piazza,
Oh yeah.
I
Yeah.
think
Yeah.
is who's responsible for all of that, and they did improve from game to game. Like if you compare Dragon Quest VII, which I think is their first 3D game, um, to the remake of Dragon Quest VI, it does look
Yeah.
significantly better, but it's there's still just kind of like a muddiness to it that sometimes has its own charm, kind of like Xenogears, but it really depends on the direction at that point,
Mm.
and the Dragon Quest games don't do anything that interesting with the 3D perspective in terms of direction, in terms of making it feel cinematic.
Oh, it definitely. Yeah. I think not until 11, because even 8 looks
Mhm.
kind of muddy, to be honest.
Yeah, a little
Um.
bit. Yeah.
So who did I forgot who mentioned it? I didn't know that. Well, I knew that there was a PS2 version of Dragon Quest V, but
Mhm.
I didn't really ever look at it. And I
It's
kind of hate
yeah.
how that looks, to be honest.
Yeah, I don't like how kind of chunky the characters look.
Yeah.
They all look like kind of squat, and yeah,
Mm.
it doesn't do it for me either. I think it's a matter of preference, but I definitely prefer how the DS version looks to the PS2 one, and yeah, of course the Super Famicom one just looks like a clean classic 16-bit RPG. It doesn't look anywhere near as good as 6, but I
Yeah.
still love that pixel art very much.
Same. Yeah. I just always bring up this subject whenever we talk about older games, but I just really want ports to. I wish rather that ports could have an option to have the original visuals for
Yeah.
this kind of stuff.
Oh, that would be amazing.
Even in a game like Saga Frontier, which I think the remaster looks great,
Mhm.
smoothing sprites aside, I still think it looks good. It works well with the backgrounds and the pre-renderedness of it, but I still kind of prefer the old version. And I know that's just me being a boomer, but or maybe it's not. I don't know. Maybe somebody needs to do like an artistic analysis of this or something.
I know what you mean, though. Sometimes you can clean it up too much, and
Yeah.
it's almost like looking a comparison. Maybe a pretentious comparison is like looking at film restoration and some of these. If you look at like a Blu-ray of a movie and they remove all the grain from it,
Yeah.
it's not the same movie. It doesn't have that visual character, that texture to it that you want it to have. Sometimes that's and there are varying degrees of success with that. Like you said, I think Saga Frontier remastered looks very good overall, but it's just slightly it's different and like I agree with you. I'd really like to just be able to flip that on or off and we're seeing that more often in games. It's still not a common thing, but I do think at some point maybe that can become the norm for these remasters, at least for the 2D ones or hybrid 2D 3D. That should be the case, I think.
Yeah, I think once the concept of game preservation becomes a more hot topic and we start to really sort of analyze the purism of this kind of thing, that's going to become more of a thing. I just in the next 5-10 years, I still kind of feel like we're going to be getting these AI upscaled stuff. That's the future for now, and then in the very foreseeable future, I think
Yeah.
most remastered, like Legend of Mana, I think is the first one to really do this. It's gonna You're gonna see a lot of AI upscaling for these kind of ports or remasters or what have you. So it's interesting to think about. But I still want the fucking old visuals. So get
Yep.
on it. Give me what I want, man. Speaking of what people want, Steve, what are some really good general tips to help you through your experience with Dragon Quest, or rather, if you're a veteran of the series, what are some things that you can keep in the back of your mind to help you enjoy these games more?
It's I think a lot of it is it really comes down to just having an open mind. It's like what we discussed earlier. Like Dragon Quest is such a comfort food sort of series for so many of us, myself included, and it's easy to become just rigid with our mindset and just not want to accept any sort of change or update. And I know that's more of a Japanese problem with the series than it is over in the West, but I would be okay with seeing the series go in a more action oriented direction. I have faith that they would still make it feel like a Dragon Quest game. And so I think, yeah, it really just going into any of these games, whether it's the remakes and uh, I guess my own mentality of just rejecting the mobile ports initially and then playing them. And despite having some issues, I still greatly enjoy them. But really the key is just being open minded and accepting that each version of the game is going to have its own pros and cons, and not one of them is probably going to be completely perfect. But there's so many versions of Dragon Quest to enjoy out there. So many, even the spin-offs, which are pretty crazy different at this point. I mean, if it weren't for Dragon Quest, in a way, we wouldn't have the Mystery Dungeon series
Mm-hmm.
because that started as that Torneko
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
Tulun spin-off. So
Yeah.
it's and getting into that a little bit more and changing the subject slightly, Dragon Quest Builders and Builders 2 are two of my all-time favorite games, and I don't like playing Minecraft. I do not like that style of game at all. I think it's just such a better, more directed experience for someone like myself who, if I'm given too much freedom in a game, I feel overwhelmed. And Dragon Quest Builders did a great job of just dropping me into this place. But then you'd have the dialogue with the god or goddess telling you what to do, and it it's really the perfect way to experience a Minecraft style game for someone like myself. So, yeah, I think I would just like to see some more open-mindedness, I guess, with fans of classic JRPGs, whether it's Dragon Quest or Final Fantasy. Final Fantasy has kind of forced it on the fan base.
Mm-hmm.
They get that change whether they want it or not. But yeah, I'm seeing a lot of good discussion about Dragon Quest 12 and what the fan expectations are versus what it's likely going to end up being. And yeah, it might be something completely different, but I'm excited to see it either way.
So, I mean, there's always the marketing aspect of video games where you want to have a marketing strategy or a presentation of a game that's going to sell the most copies, right? And I don't know if like an ARPG Dragon Quest would really succeed there. Like
Yeah, might
maybe.
not.
I mean, like and this is why these companies have market research teams, right? So I feel like it may. Okay, this is just my guess. This is like an uneducated guess, but still, like it might sell more in the U.S., but it's probably not going to sell more in Japan. I mean, it's
Yeah,
still going to sell like really well in Japan, and it's probably going to sell well here. But like, it's probably in their best interest capitalistically to stick with mostly the same formula, right? For
yeah,
this
for
particular
sure.
series. That being said, like, I don't want, and I think that developers all over the world should never be super reactive with fan criticisms or backlash. I think a perfect example of this being a negative thing is with BioWare. I think like BioWare's
Mm.
whole issue with me, the biggest issue I have with that company is the fact that how reactive, how not knee jerk. That seems kind of like myopic to say too, but like they are very reactive to things in a way that I think like it doesn't seem confident enough, and I think their games suffer greatly for it. And I think Dragon Quest has always been a series full of confidence,
Yeah.
and
So,
in its
and I
own
guess that's
way.
my main thing is as long as they are confident in the direction that they're going, whether that is with a more action oriented direction, which that does scare the crap out of me, like thinking about how badly that could be messed up. But I think at least Yuji Horii, the creator of the series, always seems to have the utmost confidence in what he wants to do. And yeah, the only time I've seen that really go in the other direction is with Dragon Quest IX, which turned out
Yeah,
fine after they went back to turn-based. But yeah, and with the new game obviously being on modern hardware, whether it's on everything, like including the Switch, it's going to have a much bigger budget than what Dragon Quest IX did. So they have to be a little bit more careful with their ambition. That's for sure.
and my guess is that this is probably going to be the highest budget Dragon Quest ever because 11 is finally a game that had decent breakthrough sales in the US. And, releasing all those different versions and ports of it, I feel like really just kind of put coins in their purse. It's like they played the Torneco minigame and they kind of succeeded. Maybe they didn't get
Yeah.
the best an inventory full of the cutter swords or carver swords, whatever they are, but like I think that they walked away from Dragon Quest 11 with maybe like a heavier pocket than they anticipated, and so I
And
think
more
that's
than
gonna go into 12.
Yeah, and more than anything, it's just really the enthusiasm for the series just went through the roof after 11
Mm-hmm.
over in the West. It's just uh it always had a small kind of cult following, but yeah, 11, even if it's not a multi-million seller, it's definitely the game that I see the most people being enthusiastic about in the series. It's really nice to see its success and see that enthusiasm. I hope that carries over to 12. Yeah, it's very exciting to see where the series goes from here.
For sure. Yeah, I mean, because like I mean, even when I tweeted the other day, I made a tweet like, "What's your favorite Dragon Quest?" or whatever, and like I think if I would have made that 5 6 years ago, uh, wouldn't have gotten the kind of traction. I think 11 brought a lot of people into the series. I mean, it made me become a like a more of a fan because before I liked Dragon Quest, it was fine, but I never really dove into it until 11 like pushed me into the waters, right? So it's like
Yeah.
even for me and I said my one of the first games I ever played like almost 30 years ago was Dragon Warrior. So it's like it's always been there, but like it's a reinvigoration of that, and
Yeah. Well,
My
as a fellow
experience
Ys
obviously
fan,
represents everything.
as a fellow Ys fan, it's kind of like Ys 8. It's the one
Yeah,
that really kind of sparked a lot of interest overseas for the series for the first time, and it's just the prettiest, the best presented. Yeah, I'm happy for both series to finally kind of get some more traction over here.
same. And I try so hard not to always mention East, but I'm really glad you did so had an excuse to.
Yeah.
Um, but but yeah, no, there's a lot of parallels there. So it's like an exciting future. And we didn't even really talk about the spin-offs too much, but I felt
Mm.
like, hey, that's a
Yeah,
good topic.
there's just so many at this point too. But really quick on the
Mhm.
subject of the spin-offs. So you hate Pachisi, but what about Fortune Street? Uh,
Not a huge fan.
what about Boom Street?
Wait, what's Boom Street?
It's the European title for Fortune Street. I was
Oh,
just messing with you.
okay.
uh,
No, no. I think I played the Wii one. The
yeah,
yeah,
I think
yeah. That's
that's
how I played it.
I think that's the only one that they brought over overseas, I
Oh,
think.
I remember downloading it on. Look, guys, I emulated a game,
Uh-oh.
and it was
Calling the
that.
cops.
Yeah, my neighbor is a cop, so he's just gonna come over here and arrest me.
He's just gonna bust through the wall.
Yeah, he's been listening this whole like, wait, I'll catch him. I'll catch the motherfucker. So yeah, no, yeah, no, I'm not a big fan of that. I will say that I did kind of like Heroes. Heroes 1 is okay. Heroes 2 is much better. I wouldn't say I loved it, but it was fun. I need to go back to it and platinum it at some
Yeah.
point. I never played like Sword or whatever it's called, Dragon Quest
Oh
Swords.
yeah, Swords is one of the rougher spin-offs. It's kind of fun for a short while, but becomes extremely tedious and will wear you out in not a not a great way.
Yeah, that's no fun. And Builders, I haven't played Builders 2, so I need to get on that
Did we
post
did we
list.
bring up Rocket Slime?
Oh no.
Because Rocket Slime is so good.
Rocket
It's so
Slime is
good.
really good. You want a good
Yeah.
Dragon Quest to start with, you start with Rocket Slime, you never look back. Or
And
Dragon
it's just
Quest Monsters.
yeah. Monsters is good too. I think Rocket Slime is just such a great, wholesome,
It's so
just
good.
adorable experience. It's just like if you want all the puns imaginable, and it's just a fun little Zelda type game with tank battles that are really cool. You can't go wrong. But yeah, Monsters as a Pokemon style game is very good. There's a bunch of those.
I only played
Am I
the
missing
first one
any?
for Game Boy back in the day.
Okay.
And so I never
Um,
I heard that Joker 2 is really good.
yeah, yeah.
Just
Joker
never played
2's.
him.
Yeah, and even Monsters 2, if you liked the original, the Game Boy Color Monsters 2 is a pretty good time. It's just very simple, streamlined monster collecting game.
I would like a
Yeah,
collection of that. Give it to
I
me.
would too. And well,
Give
they
it.
have it on the Japanese Switch store. They have the original game, so I don't know why
What?
they didn't bring it out over here. It's just untouched. Just dump the ROM on the Switch, and that's it.
It's kind of all I want. I mean, barring barring the fact that there are no technical issues with it. That's just kind of what I want,
Mhm.
to be honest. So bring your ports, man. It just I hate how much Japan teases us. Like it is kind of a hard,
So much good stuff.
as good of a time as it is to be a Dragon Quest fan. It's a shitty time because like I mean even the Dragon Quest presentation when they're talking about 10 and the
Mhm.
offline version of 10, which will probably come here, but like it was still kind of like you just
Yeah.
I want it.
uh,
Window
yeah, it's a
shopping
bummer.
always.
And someday I'll maybe muster up the courage to fully dive into 10. I've played like you, I played a bit of the tutorial, but I didn't have the patience to sit and Google Translate every line of dialogue. And
Yeah,
I know there's great walkthroughs at this point, so it's it'll happen eventually. I'll jump in. We'll see.
one day. All
One
right,
day.
well, I hate to quickly wrap this up, but we have been draconianly questing for about
Mhm.
2 hours. Anything you wanted to? Uh, uh,
It's
ooh,
my Yuji Horii signed copy of Dragon Quest XI.
Oh, that's beautiful. Did you have to like wait in line for that?
No, that this was actually shortly after Dragon Quest XI launched. Square Enix had uh, s- they had a Twitch stream where they had a contest, and you could just enter a raffle in it, and they had like three of those, and I was lucky enough to get it. So,
Oh, fuck
uh,
yeah.
yeah, I'm
Dude,
so happy.
yes.
It's maybe the possession of mine I'm most proud of as a
That's
lifelong
awesome.
Dragon Quest fan. Uh, so
This is
cool.
why you like Pachisi, because you have actual luck.
Exactly. I don't fall in the pits in that game. I just uh, only get to the treasure chest.
I own 1 through 4 on NES. So I think that's probably the thing that's worth the most that I have, or like the most
That's
prized things.
Are they complete copies by any chance?
Uh, 4 and 3 don't have boxes, unfortunately,
Okay, well,
but or
they're still
menus.
quite valuable, even loose,
Yeah, there's like I think it's like $70 for that. So
at least. Yeah,
I also have this poor slime
I
controller.
love it.
We should have
I
just
love it.
made this about the slime controller. That should have been this
Yeah,
podcast.
yeah, just a 2-hour critique of the slime controller, and we just see how it holds up to scrutiny.
Yeah, well, that's oh shit.
uh,
Well, if you play it for 2 hours, that it actually just melts.
it just
And,
melts. Yep.
yeah.
uh,
All right. Well, Steve, thank you so much for joining me on here, man. It's always a pleasure to chat with you on here and off. Real quick, remind folks where we can find you.
All right. Yeah, and thank you for having me. You can find me at Twitter as Mr. Alarm, just all one word, MRALARM. I also write for geek2geekmedia.com under my actual name, Steve Whitcamp. And so if you want to read about bad movies or Godzilla movies, and sometimes those overlap, believe it or not, check out my articles there. So yeah, had a great time joining you today.
Yeah, thanks. And again, thanks, man. Thanks everyone for listening. You could always find us on Twitter at twitter.com/podcastjump, Google and Apple Podcasts under Jump and Shoot, and on SoundCloud and Spotify. And thanks again for listening. Sorry for the technical issues with the stream. It looks like Steve is like, no, fuck this. I ain't saying goodbye. So, Steve, thanks again, man. If you're still there, and
Outro.
yeah, take care, everyone.
Ah.